Okay, I'd like to call the February 27th regular meeting of the Tiverton Budget Committee to order. Do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Yeah, would you please call the roll? Or do you want me to?
Do you have it in front of you? I don't mind.
I'll do it. Okay, Edwards is here. Deb Janet,
Present.
Tom Haley,
Present.
Ruth Hallenbeck, absent. Joe Souza just walked in. Jennifer Joslin,
Present.
Brenda McNally,
Present.
Jennifer Rashley,
Present.
Mike Dakotas,
Present.
and welcome back Sherry Acker.
Present. Thank you.
It's good to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
Okay, we'll do the open public forum. Anybody would care to speak on something pertaining to tonight's schedule? No takers? Okay. So tonight, we're going to start with the Tiverton Wastewater District. Oh,
I have to recuse from my storm, so I'm gonna step out.
do you have to step out?
I think you have to step away from the table when you recuse, correct?
If
This
you have a
is-
house that's affected by the district, maybe.
No, last year I was advised, my father was an inspector, and I was advised by the previous solicitor to recuse from wastewater. But when you recuse, you have to step away from the table, correct? Yes.
Okay.
That's your recusal form, Nancy.
Good question, did we receive any mail from the DPW?
No,
Okay.
I have not received any written communication from anyone. Have at it.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. Just by way of introductions, my name is Bill Gerlach. I'm on the Board of Directors with the Tiverton Wastewater District. I'm joined tonight by Carrie Sanangelo, who's our phenomenal Executive Director. I just had a couple of things I wanted to just put out very briefly, and then we'll turn over to Carrie. So on behalf of the entire Board of Directors for the Tiverton Wastewater District, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening and talk a little bit about what we do and our ask. Our board chair, Leroy Kendricks, sends his apologies for not being able to join us. He was unfortunately in Chicago dealing with a dire family medical emergency, so he's unable to join us. But my opening remarks will be brief. It is our sincere hope that you leave tonight's brief presentation with an enhanced understanding and appreciation for the critical role that the Tiverton Wastewater District plays on behalf of the town. Not only in helping to protect public health and safety through our on-site wastewater treatment inspections, but also in terms of mitigating the financial penalty risks that can befall or could befall the town if non-compliant on-site wastewater treatment systems are not dealt with in an effective manner. You'll see that we stand ready to continue to be an exemplary partner of the town as we continue our mission here. And again, thank you, and we're open to any questions as we go along. But with that, I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. We'll get started with basic agenda topics. We'll start with a brief executive summary. We'll go through the town's ordinance on on-site wastewater management, and also talk about how we have been partnering with the town in executing that ordinance. We also have a cautionary tale and other risks to consider. So we'll start off with our executive summary. Our district was actually created through the passing of the Wastewater District Act in 2014, and the goal is to work on behalf of the town to safeguard public health and protect and improve ground and surface water resources by implementing efficient and effective wastewater management. We do seek to do that in a two-pronged approach, namely serving the town through on-site wastewater management and also through our sewer expansion. Today we'll only be talking about on-site management. Our district is incredibly successful and efficient with the funding that you provide us, but we could do much more, and we're going to talk about that today. We could reduce the risk and liability for the town with adequate funding and enforcement cooperation. For this fiscal year, we are actually requesting an increase right now with approximately 6,000 households under the on-site program. These are all homes that have a septic or cesspool. So with 6,000 households represented there, the town's budget of $30,000 per year equals about $5 per household. And we're asking you to increase that to approximately $20 per household. And we also recommend that we move forward with establishing a contract for these services that has funding that is actually set apart from the general funds to ensure a cooperative success. So there's two things to really consider there.
Can we ask, you want to wait till the end or take questions?
We'll have questions at the end, yeah.
Okay.
To go through the town ordinance, the town actually states that they have an obligation to report septic system failures to Rhode Island DEM. That's the town's obligation. The town also requires regular inspection of septic systems, and the town places responsibility of inspections and proper septic system functioning on the property owner, which means the property owner is responsible for getting their system inspected and for having regular maintenance. The primary concern for this ordinance was to safeguard the public health and with the safety of the drinking water, as well as surface and groundwater. With regard to inspections, the town ordinance states that the first maintenance inspection is for a baseline so that we can understand, namely, where the tank is located and the condition of any repairs that might be needed to that tank. This initial inspection it should be completed within 45 days of being noticed, and it should also include a full pump down of your system. After that, the town ordinance states that there should be routine maintenance inspections. Between this initial inspection and the routine maintenance inspections, this is when the homeowner gets a frequency of how often they should be pumping their system, because that is going to vary from one property to another. Now, if you are not compliant with this, then you get a notice of non-compliance, which we send out by certified mail. And then the second notice is actually a notice of violation. We also send that certified, and we have to send a copy of that to Rhode Island DEM. So that's all within the town ordinance. It mandates that we do that. With regard to enforcement, Rhode Island DEM actually holds the town of Tiverton accountable for all enforcement matters. So we are partnering with the town to provide the noticing and advisement of inspection and maintenance services, but ultimately, if someone is on the hook for that, that is the town. And DEM does hold the towns responsible. The town does have the authority to levy fines for violation of the ordinance. In the history of the ordinance, that has not been done. The town also has within their ability the right to contract for services with inspectors, installers, and maintenance providers as needed. So far, that has also not been done, and in other communities, that is something that they do. The town actually pays for inspectors to go out and handle the inspections and then issues the bill to the homeowners. So that's another way to really think about this with regard to this ordinance. There's also an ordered maintenance of systems based on the inspection results. So we identify which systems need to have updates to them. And we also provide technical assistance as well as guidance on loan and grant programs to the property owners. So sometimes the homeowner will come in and ask, well, where is my septic system? And if the state doesn't know, we go out and we try to help the homeowner find that. We work with contractors for the same exact options. And when homeowners come to us and ask us, well, how am I going to pay for this? We help them with the Community Septic System Loan Program application, and we help them with navigating through Rhode Island housing. We also require maintenance records related to septic systems, and that is something that is inconsistent at best. We utilize a program called Carmody, and a lot of this inspectors know how to use that, but it's just their updating of it is not always consistent. And so when we take an approach on enforcement, we always offer the benefit of the doubt to the property owner. That they probably have had their system inspected, that they probably have actually had the repairs done, but it's very likely that maybe the records just haven't been maintained. And if it's just a matter of records not being maintained, send us the receipts, we'll go ahead and get that updated. But if it's not, then the notices provide them the opportunity to get this taken care of. With regard to reporting, we've actually included copies of our 2019 reports for everyone. We issued these to the town administrator in December 2019 for the 2019 reporting period. So we actually do that annually. We highlight our progress as well as problematic areas. You don't need to go through that now. We'll actually go through some of the highlights of that. I just wanted to provide that to you for your reference. We also update the town administrator on the status of grants and loan programs, specifically how much is remaining in the C-SLIP program and how much has been used. We also provide notice of violations and the number of inspections that we've conducted. We also have a public education focus. Now, last year, Leroy Kendricks provided a public education meeting at the library on your on-site system and how to manage that. And then we also, so he went over the goals of on-site wastewater management then. We have since had 3 additional public meetings with regard to people who are abutters or just general updates from the district that are all in accordance with our updated communications policy and commitment for transparency with the town. So we do have a lot of outreach. Specifically this month alone, we had a workshop at the Senior Center with Church Community Housing represented so that if anyone needed additional financial resources to take care of their issues, we brought the bank to them. So we are making headway in at least making it easier for townspeople to get access to these resources. We do cover how to inspect, how often to inspect, a list of inspectors, how your system operates, and how to maintain it. We frequently come away from those workshops with lots of surprise that people have had their systems for 30 and 40 years and have never actually had them pumped out. Again, we would like to take this as an opportunity to let everyone know that you should pump out your septic system more frequently than 30 to 40 years. And then again, the availability of financial assistance. Now, the implementation phases of the town ordinance were such that the Stafford Pond watershed, those properties needed to be fully inspected upon adoption of the ordinance. And please bear with me on my pronunciation. Nanaquacket Pond, thank you. Should be inspected by July 2008. Saconnet Waterfront by November 2011. And then the Nonquit Pond by July 2012, with the remainder of the town by July 2014. And that's the first round of inspections. I'll let you know that we are still in the midst of conducting the first round of inspections, given the resources that have been made available to the district to provide these services. Just to kind of give you an example of where we are in this timeline. We still have a lot of work to do. With regard to financing, and this may be a surprise to some of us, the town council actually has the authority to raise funds for the on-site management program. It's part of the ordinance. And I actually took that part of the ordinance out for all of us to take a look at today. The wastewater collection superintendent and town administrator may propose a fee schedule for approval by the town council as a resolution to be assessed each owner of an on-site wastewater treatment system. Said fee shall be based on the total number of on-site wastewater treatment systems in town and the administrative and technical costs associated with providing the services herein. Any funds collected or raised for purposes of implementing the on-site wastewater management program shall be kept as a dedicated account separate from the town's general fund. This has been in the ordinance from the beginning. This has actually never happened. Just to let you know where we stand in regard to the ordinance. We also are eligible for grants and loans. Not all towns and municipalities in the state of Rhode Island qualify to participate in the C-SLIP loan program. And part of the reason why this town qualifies is because of this ordinance. The partnership with the district. Just to let you know who we are, we have 4 part-time employees. All of us work part-time. The total fiscal year revenue budget for our district was $920,209, and that was for 2020. The town agreed to pay our district $30,000 for the management of on-site services. Just to do some quick math for you, that represents 3.2% of our overall revenue. I actually did some math for each employee at our district just to give you an idea of how many personnel hours this averages out to. And this equates to approximately 3 personnel hours per week as a maximum. I can tell you that with our lovely office manager, Pat Nanini, she fields questions with regard to real estate transactions and septic system lookups in the state records at least 3 hours a week alone, apart from us issuing any notices or inspection charting or follow-up. So that's kind of where we are with what the district can offer the town with regard to what the town is offering the district by way of revenue. Our progress on this, again, we provided that to the town administrator in December. The Stafford Pond area has 92% compliance among 413 non-vacant properties. That's impressive. This is the strongest area of compliance, and it's very comforting, but considering that is a source of drinking water. In the Central West District, we have an 80% compliance in 125 non-vacant properties. And then moving on to the non-Quinton-Nanaquacket Ponds area, we have 66% compliance among 41 non-vacant properties.
What is Central West?
Central West would be, there's actually a map in for each area, and each of those are highlighted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is as a result of us issuing notices of needing to have inspections updated and repairs records updated. With our enhanced funding request, an increase in funding can actually result in us allocating more personnel hours to an inspection and compliance program. It could also support an enforcement process, whereas there's a local municipal court judge or clerk who can actually issue the fines that the town is eligible to levy for noncompliance. So you could actually financially support that enforcement. And by doing that, that can decrease the risk to the town from Rhode Island DEM. We will talk about that on the next slide. By making funding separate from the general fund, what that will do is it will allow us to address just the approximate 6,000 properties And it will, again, right now, on average, we're spending about $5 per property with the $30,000 from the general fund. But what we're asking you to do is increase that to $20 per property and to separate that out from the general fund. The risks for the town. And this would be risks for the town even for right now, even for how things are and how they've been going. DEM could fine the town. There could be loss of eligibility for the Community Septic System Loan Program. And there have already been closure of beaches. Grinnell's Beach was actually closed last summer for high bacteria counts. And then there were increased costs. There could be increased costs for water treatment to protect the drinking sources. So, to compare a good and a bad example in our neighbors, the Charlestown, Rhode Island community has an on-site management program that is fully funded. Their budget actually allocates for approximately $130,000. They have a fully funded program with enforcement with their municipalities, and it's very well maintained. And Rhode Island DEM has actually used that as a banner, something to grow towards. So that's something for us to kind of look forward to. And by example, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Portsmouth. In Portsmouth, the DEM actually found the town in 2010 in violation and fined them $186,000, and they quoted that as for long-standing failure to prevent or mitigate the discharge of sewer into the bay. This was while the town had already contracted and had ongoing work to address the on-site management issues. So that's very similar to the situation we're in now. You guys are already putting a focus towards that with $30,000 a year of effort. So you're already in progress. That does not mean that you are going to be exempt from Rhode Island DEM policies. The town actually disregarded recommendations for engineering studies that called for the need for sewers. And ultimately, they chose to forego sewers for advanced septic systems. Those advanced systems typically begin around $30,000. The property owner has to pay for that, and that doesn't include the annual maintenance that's related. That's generally about $2,000 a year. So that's what the town of Portsmouth did. As far as their municipal enforcement, they have been very aggressive in enforcing inspections as well as fines. You've seen articles in the newspaper where homeowners do not have hardship policies, whereas we do with our district. In Portsmouth, they are fined $100 per day for violation with no source of help or aid from the town on that end. So that's a cautionary tale. We don't want to go that direction. We want to have a more supportive, cooperative relationship as opposed to an adversarial one.
Excuse me, are people losing their homes then?
They are having tax sales. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if we're not gonna wait till the end, I just wanna say that that
No,
slide
let's
is
wait till
kinda
the-
misleading, because the average home in Portsmouth and Island Park area, the septic system didn't have to be that hybrid. In fact, like, I sold my home there, it was $18,000 for the septic system.
That's a standard septic system.
And most of the homes over there, that's all they need. It's only the people that are right on the water with postage-sized lots.
And that's
So
very,
that slide is misleading. That's not the cost
So
on average.
I think the important thing to note here is that's perhaps we're focusing on the wrong bullet there. The right bullet, the proper bullet to focus there is what the RIDEM fined the town.
Well,
They
that
didn't
was-
find just a
That was
section of the
because
town.
they took money to do the sewer research and then changed their mind because they realized you can't put sewers in Island Park because all the plumbing is underground. You'd have to have a totally sealed, pressurized system. So you have to know the details of what happened over there.
And there were several engineering
So it
reports
was
that
not-
actually
Just like
recommended
it's not
sewers.
cost prohibitive in areas around here where the piping within the manholes would be below water level when the tide comes in.
Mr. Souza, all we're trying to point out here is that there is an exposure for the town of Tiverton if
I
we,
agree.
if we do not.
I
This
agree.
is one
The
particular
system has
example.
failed, we have to deal with it.
And
But to
the,
say that we have to go to every house in this town, particularly new subdivisions, I mean, how many new subdivisions? Why do we
Well,
need to even look at their septic system?
All of our memos actually show that we do not inspect within 3 years, the first 3 years. And that addresses those new
I'm
subdivisions.
sorry, I'm gonna calm down, calming down.
Let's just continue with
Thanks.
you guys.
Thanks. So in summary, the district has been incredibly successful and efficient considering the funding that we have received. We would like to do more. We would like to protect the town, but we can only do what we can with what we're given. So if we had more adequate cooperation from the town with regard to enforcement and with regard to funding, then we could do more. Again, just for timeline reference, we're approximately 14 to 16 years behind the original ordinance timeline. And so when we go back to the reason for that fine for the town of Portsmouth for long-standing issues, we're in the midst of a long-standing issue. Even though we're putting all of our effort towards it, and even though we can admit that I'm sure the town is saying we're giving you everything we possibly can, we're not denying that. We're just saying this is the situation. Even though we're doing everything we can, it may not be enough. There's still potential that the town could be fined. And this would not be a fine that would be just for the Bay Street area or just for the areas that are close to the bay. This would be borne by everyone in the town. We do recommend establishing a contract for these services so that it's not a line item in the general fund, but so that it is separate. So that's something just to consider. With regard to what the ordinance is, if there's opportunity to make changes to the ordinance, just wanted to throw that out there as an option to consider.
yeah, and just one additional note on that. I think with a number of years' experience behind us with the ordinance, I think the district, while not the purview of this particular body or meeting per se, the district does stand ready and willing to work
Yeah.
with the council and other entities in town to say, hey, we have some years of experience here, let's go back.
What's
Let's
most
see
reasonable?
what can we enhance, modify to make things more effective, so on and so forth. But that aside, the ask for more funds to do more, so that we limit the exposure for the town and protect the public safety, is still tantamount.
That's our goal. So what questions do you have for us?
We start with Sherry.
Thanks. Okay. So you're saying that if we increase the amount from $5 per household, which I don't know where, I mean, did you guys just come up with that you needed, that you wanted to move it up to 20? Because you don't actually inspect each household, right? You're just kind of separating it between the numbers of the town.
Well, the way that we actually take care of inspections in the district are two-pronged. One, we watch all the real estate transactions as much as we possibly can. Our office manager actually gets an update for property transactions that have taken place, and she speaks with those realtors as well as the property owners in the midst of those transactions. That's the lowest hanging fruit, and that's the easiest way for us to ensure compliance, because there are deadlines with regard to when a property changes over. The other part is that we focus on regions of the town, which is actually what the ordinance asks that we do. And so we look through the state records to see what's been inspected, and we pull those guys out. So we are only looking for the ones that do not have updated records. And again, we take the we throw out some possibility for doubt there, that maybe someone has had their system inspected, they just haven't had it recorded.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm getting this correct. So you said that if you get $20 per household, then you'd be able to complete these pond inspections that need to be done quicker and get them done?
We have more personnel hours to devote to it.
And you said that we would lose grant fund, we could possibly lose grant funding, but you said the reason why we have the grant funding is because we have an ordinance. So how would we lose it if we already have the ordinance?
If we're not actually effective with carrying out the ordinance, then we're now at the point with the C-SLIP program where we're looking to refund that for the town. It's about a 4-month process to refund that loan from it's the state revolving fund. And if we're showing that, yeah, we've been non-compliant even though we have this ordinance, then again, just like in Portsmouth, they've actually received these funds to do this work, but if they're not actually doing it, then why should we give you the money?
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I'll first say I know it's a policy issue. But this ordinance, when it was passed, I remember sitting in the council chamber here, and we read through it, and it was far and beyond even what DEM was asking us to do. And with the changes that have been made upstate, where people now are allowed to stay in their homes until they sell it and then change it, similar to what Mass has been doing for years, I think this ordinance really needs to be relooked at, but, you know, it's just like 9,000 other ordinances in town that probably need tweaking. But the money that they're asking for, I just don't see the need. I think that basically what we need them to do is when a system has failed, then to assist the homeowners. And then if the homeowner is not, you know, fixing their system, well, DEM needs to be called in. It's not the town's job. DEM handles that.
How do we know a system's failed if they have not inspected it?
Because there's water running into the neighbor's yard that smells like you know what. That's the way
Exactly.
people always report it, and they usually call the building inspector first. So, you know, I'm just saying, and it's true. They usually call the building inspector's office first.
And that, I would argue, is.
And then they
more of a-
tell them, call wastewater. And I agree, you're providing a service to the town. But the idea that we're gonna go out and inspect everybody's house, you know, and things like that, I mean, it's not needed. I mean, I have my system pumped, and the guy looks at it for me and says, everything looks good. I mean, he's a professional, and he comes, he pumps it out, and he looks around down in there, makes the tank, make sure it's not, you know, collapsed in or anything. There was no dirt and stuff in the bottom of the tank, like the wall fell in, like older tanks will do. I mean, people take care of their own homes. Nobody wants to see their water running down into their neighbor's yard. But it's the hard cases that we need somebody to go out and do the enforcement. But it's not 6,000 homes. It's just that, in Stafford Pond, I think most of that has been completed. You said 80% compliant, and then the rest probably don't.
92.
I mean, you know, non-quit, yeah. You got it, you know, homes out here that maybe need, you know, been out there 100 years, probably got 55-gallon drum buried in the ground. Who knows what they got, and honeycombs. But if it's not failed and there's no evidence, I don't know. In watershed areas, I agree. Sometimes, you know, it's right up on the water and a home has failed. You want to make sure that if the people need assistance, make it. But to step up compliance or enforcement and make people that, like in subdivisions, just because, your subdivision hit 20 years old, now everybody in that subdivision has to have their septic inspected. That doesn't make any sense. If they were properly maintained, that 20-year doesn't mean anything.
That's exactly right. If you were actually properly maintaining your system, then we wouldn't need to tell
But-
an entire neighborhood that's 20 years old.
But the systems
it's time
that
to
don't
start
get
inspecting.
pumped eventually, because the tank gets so full, the water starts perking out of the top of it. And then the neighbors, I mean, as close as homes are up in the like north end, nobody's gonna get away with that for long.
They
That's
do.
my only point.
Okay, let's move on here.
Yep.
Ruth?
Just one.
Can we limit our focus to funding and not policy, please?
Well, I'm talking about why I don't wanna fund it, so I don't know how
We
else I can
We
explain it.
understand that. Well, the way you explained it is go to one of their meetings and do it there.
Like they're gonna listen to me, come on.
Listen to me, and I just went.
Yeah, okay.
Through.
So, could I just,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, could I just very quickly, I think, just 2 quick points here. I think we embrace and employ a strategy at the wastewater district of being proactive and not reactive. Being reactive and attending to matters after the failure doesn't really benefit the homeowner, it doesn't benefit the neighbors, and it certainly doesn't benefit the environment where we could have a situation where that wastewater is going into a drinking water source or the bay or what have you. So, you know, the funding goes towards more of a proactive nature to get ahead of problems before they even become a problem. So,
Through.
How often do you propose testing each property?
I'm sorry.
How often do you propose testing each property?
Well, with this, it would vary based on how many people are in the home. If it's a multifamily home, obviously that's going to have more use than a single-family home. And there are different requirements there. But that's actually determined from the person who inspects it and does the pump down. And they can give the homeowner the status of their pump, the status of their system, and how frequently it needs to be maintained. And based on what that recommendation is, that's what gets recorded in Carmody, and that's what we look at. So we wouldn't look at a property if it says, oh, this was inspected and passed 5 years ago and doesn't need another even, look at until another 3 years. It wouldn't even be on our radar. So we go based off of what's on record. If there's nothing on record, we continue notifying those property owners.
So you have a grid that tells you for every property.
Yeah. And you'll actually see examples of that grid in the handouts you've received.
Okay.
It's actually highlighted.
And how do you prioritize which ones to do first?
The ones that are closest to drinking water sources or within 200 feet of the bay. And that is in accordance with the Rhode Island DEM policies that state that there's a mandate to protect those water sources.
A mandate from where, I'm sorry?
Rhode Island DEM.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you get water tests along the shore, and how often?
We actually don't test the water, but when we receive reports from Rhode Island DEM based on water testing, or if something is closed, we actually get copies of what the bacteria counts are or what's growing there, so that we can determine, is this really runoff from a septic system, or is this some other sort of bacteria or fungus or algae that may be growing.
And can you get us copies of those reports for the last year?
I can get with our district engineers to see if we can do that. It may be with the Rhode Island DEM.
Yeah, okay, I'll be in touch with, through the chairman to get those reports. You mentioned beaches closed. Can you tell me how many times Tiverton beaches were closed
It was
last year?
just once,
I think so.
and
Not much.
It was in June of
Which-
2019.
which beach?
It was Grinnell's.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I think that's all I had, but thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yes, thank you also. I'm just curious where your funding comes from?
Our funding for the $30,000 for the on-site comes straight from the town. The rest of our funding for our revenue comes straight from sewer users, from
Oh,
usage and
right, I see.
operations and maintenance administration fees.
I see, thanks. And for the entities that pump septic systems, are they required to have licenses and be certified?
Yeah,
Or?
they're licensed through the state. It's a very easy license to get. A lot of plumbers and pipe fitters generally get an inspector's license. It's something that you just get once and you don't have to renew. It's very easy to get. So yeah, it's common.
Yeah, it would be nice if there was some sort of requirement or suggestion that they do, you know, talk to the homeowner as to what they saw, or, you know, give it a quick inspection and just let them know how things are. I think that would be.
They're actually
go a long
required to
way.
do that. On
Really?
on the slip that they give the homeowner, it gives them the status of what work was performed, as well as any repairs that are noted. If those repairs were not completed, it leaves it in a repair needed status. If it has been completed, it's followed up,
Yeah.
and recorded that it has been completed.
Is that a standardized form?
It is, and it's through Carmody.
Okay, thank you, that's all my.
Thank you for your presentation. With all due respect, we are the Budget Committee. We approve funding for programs that we have policies in place. We don't make policy. We don't change ordinances. And I think what you're asking is outside of where we are as a town at this point. So I just don't think that you're coming to us to asking for this, and it's not something that we can provide for you. You know, we have some of our council members here, if they want to say anything where we are, or. We listen to you.
Good evening. Tricia Hilton. So I'm going to be really brief on this, but the council did have a preliminary discussion about this, and it's sort of the same discussion we've had for the last 3 years, which is that, in the council's opinion, the ordinance is woefully out of date. And we tried this program. It was instituted, and frankly, it's never worked. And there are a lot of reasons. It's not just the wastewater district's fault, but there are parts of town that have never been inspected. There are parts of town that are on their third set of inspections. It's not really, it's just not, there isn't teeth in the ordinance. DEM's regulations are now supersede ours, and some of our regulations in there are no longer valid. I would like to make a couple of points, though, and I respectfully disagree with Carrie here. First of all, yes, Grinnell's Beach was closed one day due to high bacteria counts. That was a direct result of an enormous rainstorm, and the sewage treatment plant in Fall River got inundated, and they had a sewage release. It wasn't because of septic systems, and every once in a while that happens because, you know, Fall River dumps their sewage when their storm drains can't handle it. As far as DEM goes, you know, the town feels that it has a very good working relationship with DEM most of the time. We don't feel that there's any current risk of fine or anything else due to septic systems. There is, DEM will put their foot down, and that's why we're getting sewers in portions of North End. That can happen. Because over a long period of time, DEM determined that the contamination in the Sakonnet River was related directly to and caused by excessive septic leachate from the Robert Gray and Summerfield area and Riverside Drive. And DEM did mandate we have to sewer that. We have no other portions of town right now that are under any such threat. So I don't think that we're in imminent danger of an enormous fine from DEM. That being said, old failed septic systems are a significant problem. We don't have public water in lots of parts of our town. The 2 reservoirs that we do have are subject to septic leachate contamination. Everybody else who's drinking out of fractured bedrock, again, is. But we've really got to upgrade the ordinance and think about the logical way to do this. I don't think that the council at this point, at least based on a preliminary discussion that we had the other night, is interested necessarily in increasing our contribution. But we would like to work with the wastewater district to get a more practical, enforceable ordinance in place.
Thank you.
Well, as I said earlier, I have attended at least one of their meetings, so I have a fairly good handle on what was presented tonight. Our focus, however, is They're asking for $30,000. That's what they have gotten in the past. They would like more. What will they do with it? Enhanced inspections, all right? Right now, the bulk of our inspections are done when a house sells. You have a year to put an upgraded, to have it at least inspected, and then if repairs need to be done, you have a year to do them. Either the seller or the new owner, doesn't say who, just has to be done.
A lot of cases don't even wait in a year.
We cannot set up a separate fund. We cannot create a separate fund. That has to be done by the town council. We can recommend it, but we can't do it. So just please keep in mind what the request is and how we're going to deal with that. Mike?
Thank you both for the presentation. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, the whole point of us coming today was just to give an overview of what we're doing, what we could do, what we're willing to, be practical and change, and some of the things are outdated. And just to put it out there as, best case scenario is looking towards Charlestown, and worst case scenario is looking towards Portsmouth, and really trying to gauge where we as a town need to be.
Great, thank you. One question, so you have for FY '20, a budgeted revenue number of $920,000. And I know I could go to your meetings and look at your budget, so I apologize, I haven't done that. Is any of that, assuming you break even?
Yeah.
Is that the budget?
We have a little bit of growth, yeah.
Okay. Is any of the 920 spent on any of the inspection, the notification stuff? So, or is solely what you do from the $30,000 appropriated by the town?
It's only from the $30,000. With regard to the on-site services, with regard to inspections, handling real estate, and also public education, it's all from that $30,000.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So in asking or recommending that the number, the amount of money spent be increased from $5 per household to $20 per household, are you suggesting to create a separate fund, or just to augment,
That would be the ideal.
increase? So you're saying separate fund?
That would be the ideal, and
Okay.
that's specifically because not all of that would actually come to the wastewater district. A healthy portion of that would remain with the town so that they could do municipal enforcement.
Okay.
So that they could provide their own personnel hours to put towards that as well.
Okay, so that would be a
Yeah.
policy issue?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And
The
then,
wastewater fund would no longer be as a bottom line of the landfill.
Right.
It
yeah.
would be a separate line item.
And then one other question from our town councilors, as Ms. Hilton just stated, their understanding right now is that there's a good relationship with DEM. Do you have additional information to suspect that they might come down hard on us anytime soon?
Just looking by comparison at what happened in Portsmouth, they had a working relationship. They were in the midst of several engineering studies. They were actively working as a town towards a solution. And within the same month as they released an engineering report, they were hit with a fine for $186,000. So in a lot of cases, it was reported that came out of left field because they were working so diligently toward it. And again, they did know in some areas that they had mandates to fix certain areas, just like we did here. But we have a long-standing issue with this ordinance.
If they did with Portsmouth, were they kind of hit over the head without warning?
No, they had warning. They knew that they were at risk. But at the same time, it was no different than saying that we had parts of our town that mandated sewers. If we had not been able to close this sewer expansion, then we would be right back at square one with Riverside Drive and Robert Gray.
Okay. All right, I'm just trying to understand the immediacy.
Because we've had people who are in our phase one project area who really needed to make upgrades to their systems, but because we've had this imminent sewer project, we've been able to issue letters that state that they're exempt from making upgrades. And Rhode Island DEM has actually said that they could hold off until 2020 when they know that we're coming in with this sewer. If that had not happened, then we would be right back at square one with those neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. Thanks a lot.
I guess it should be noted, Portsmouth never had to pay that fine. They created a wastewater district. And they found out that, I guess houses that severely out of compliance, it can actually turn the water off to the house. Court order. So that's kind of the enforcement to make them, not drag them into municipal court, so. Because if the septic systems fail, they can go to court and have the water shut off.
Thank you, John. Next up is the school department. We have Dr. Sanchioni.
Chairman Edwards?
You?
CEO? Good evening. See, you have our budget book present.
We've got tons of stuff.
Yes.
So, good evening and thank you for having us. As we have a quorum present, I'm going to call the school committee into order.
Need you in my house.
So just for, if I can, for sort of everyone, I'm Jerry Larkin, Chair. I have with me Mrs. Black and Mrs. Pavo from the school committee. Ms. Palish sends her regrets. It's high tax season, and I believe Mrs. Farnworth is not feeling well. And I have Dr. Sanchioni, our superintendent of schools, and Amy Roderick, our director of finance and administration. And also we have our principals, Mrs. Craven, Ms. Wardell, and Mr. Cabral, and our assistant superintendent, Amy Downley-Roach. So thank you again for having us. Let us know when and how you want us to start.
You have the floor.
Have the floor? Okay. We can leave it. You can ask Amy. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening and present to you the FY21 School Department budget request. And if anything, I want to say to this evening, we want to make everything crystal clear, transparent. I mean, that is the absolute goal here, obviously, to answer any questions you might have, but to show you a lot of information and kind of go through it in a way, at any point you have a question, I think it might be pertinent to answer that. As we put together this request, I just want to start with some goals out here and sort of frame the budget request for you. You can see the bulleted items up there. It's meet all our fixed and mandated costs, maintain all professional positions, meet mandated costs associated with special education, calculated increases in operations energy, maintain our capacity for technology and curriculum, educate the 1,800 students who come on a daily basis to high levels. So in essence, this is a level staff, level service request. No new staff, no new programs. Take what we're doing in FY20, move it 1 year ahead. Those are the costs we're going to show you. But some background information first. Looking at our enrollment, and you've seen over the years the enrollment has slightly declined in the Tiverton Public Schools. But just to give you some background, we have an agency who do predictions for us. They use 3 sources of information. They look at birth rates, they look at homes that are for sale or sold in town that have bedrooms, and bedrooms more than one usually correspond to children, and they look at new developments. And that information being put together is suggesting a trend that the population of the Tiverton Public Schools is going to gradually start increasing over the next 4 or 5 years. And just scroll, just use that. Yeah, okay, let's go one more. And some more background information. This is one I know you'll take particular pride in. This shows you the residential tax rates in Rhode Island for FY19. However, I threw FY18 in there for Tiverton. And so you see that Tiverton's tax rate actually went down from 18 to 19. You had a big part in making that decision. It was the only community in Rhode Island that actually reduced their residential tax rates. It gives you a sense of how Tiverton compares to neighboring communities. And here I show you the per pupil expenditure. The most recent data for public schools in Rhode Island is FY18. And obviously you can see Tiverton in the red bar. And certainly this chart would suggest to you that Tiverton is not overpaying for education. It certainly feels supported by the community. But right there, sort of smack in the middle, so to say. And I wanted to give you some background on how the budget is comprised. If you take the orange and the light blue slice there, that's our staff. And that's 75% of our budget. So as I start speaking to you regarding the numbers of the budget, 75% are people, and that's what a school budget should be. Our success is predicated on the people who work with our students and run our schools. The other 25%, all those other slices, those are our transportation, our out-of-district special education, our energy, things of that nature. We'll break that down for you as the presentation continues. But if I ask you just to focus on the 2 biggest slices there, the benefits and the compensation, which is again 75%, I wanted to break that down for you. And this part shows you how that personnel, how our budget expands there. So 65% for teachers, the next highest is paraprofessionals, 16%, then custodians and administrative assistants at 5%, and administration coming in at 4%. And again, to suggest to you that the Tiverton Public Schools budget is again based on people who service children. And again, that's what you want these percentages to be at. So before we start talking about the FY21 request, it's important for me to show you how FY20 was established. Appreciatively to all of you, the operating budget allocated through the town for this year was the second number down there, at $31.8 or $31.9 million. However, to run the Tiverton Public Schools this year took almost $33 million. So to make that to bring our operating budget into sync with what our needs were, the school committee then allocated funds from 2 different sources, Medicaid and the fund balance. You can see the amounts there. But in red, I'm showing you, it really created a $1.1 million deficit. That's one-time money. It was a wise decision to use that. It prevented layoffs. It allowed us to move the district forward another year. But that's the starting point when we started creating FY21. So in showing you that, here comes FY21. And here comes our request. So again, I show you the appropriation, the $31.8 or $31.9 million budget we're operating on that's appropriated. The request is to increase the budget by 4%, which would be $986,000. We know what our current state aid number is, which is $321,000, which would increase the budget by $1.2 million. So the request from the town, the maximum request from the town is a $31.1 million budget. But the same thing replicates itself. To have a level service budget, to move all the staff forward 1 year, to move all the programs ahead 1 year, calculated increases in energy and special ed, if you appropriate 4%, $33.1 million, we have a $2.2 million deficit. And I'll certainly provide some more information and show you some factors behind that. So again, I want to break down that budget for you. 75% of our budget is people. So here's what drives our people, our person requests here. We're currently working on $17.7 million for staffing, and these are the factors that drive the staffing up. So our contracts, our COLA, step increases, which are contractually fixed and mandated, substitutes, we have a growing need there, longevity, a small amount, non-union personnel, a small amount. That's what drives the increase in the 75% of our budget, which makes the request $18.9 million. That 25% of our budget is our expenses. Now, I'll say to you, in your budget book, this is all tabbed out for you. So you have a tab that says personnel, and that will show you every line item for every person employed that equals that 75%. Then you have another tab section for expenses, will show you every line item that equals that other 25%. So with our expense budget, you can see we're asking to increase that by approximately $1 million. And here's the drivers behind that. These are all fixed and mandated costs. The costs for special education, our transportation, our bus bid, our numbers came in 8% higher this year. Health, dental, insurance premiums are up $259,000. Our retirement contribution is $95,000 higher next year. Technology for us, the things that run our school system, our SIS system, our student information system, our e-finance, the things that run the school, those subscriptions are, they increase on an annual basis. That's the number there, and our unemployment insurance. So again, I'm showing this to you to say we're not adding any technology, we're not adding any textbooks, we're not adding any curriculum, we're just trying to move forward, but these are fixed and mandated costs. A big part of our budget, so again, whether it's 33 million or 35 million, whatever one number we work with for the next school year, we're going to spend almost $2 million in transportation. I'm going to ask our Director of Finance, Amy Roderick, to explain that to you.
Thank you. So you'll see in FY20 we spent, should be expected to spend about $1.6 million. And if you add just the simple 8% of extending the transportation contract, that brings us up to just under $2 million. And also part of that is an increase in our special ed transportation costs due to the services that some of the students need. And as you can see, we have regular and secondary to and from the regular bus, but we also have we are required to bus students to charter schools, vocational schools, non-public schools, and then of course we have a small dollar amount there for sports and extracurricular activities. We are also required by the state of Rhode Island to have bus monitors at the elementary and middle schools, and in addition to special education. So all of this is mandated. And unfortunately, the transportation industry right now is in a crunch as we've been doing our research. And whether we go with our current vendor or we go out to bid or whatever, the costs are escalating because they're having a driver shortage, as well as their collective bargaining agreements are also sort of skyrocketing. So, and unfortunately, they're passing that cost along to us.
So another big driver of our budget, and I wanted to just show you some numbers concerning that, is special education. So again, whether it's a $33 million budget or a $35 million budget, we're going to spend almost $8.5 million on special education. These are, again, fixed and mandated costs. You can see the categories up there. I won't read all those to you, but just show you that, it has a very impactful effect on any school budget. This is in Tiverton, this is probably every community in Rhode Island, but it's one we have to be prepared for, it's one we have to accept, and it's one we have to budget for. However,
I'm sorry, can you go back to that because it's different than the page that we have included? The number we have for out-of-district placement is 2,520,000 instead of the 2.3.
Right, our total is 8,720,000.
and that is,
In this, I'm sorry.
yeah, so those numbers continue to change, and we've brought a program in-house that brought that number down. So what you're seeing here is the most up-to-date information.
Okay, thank you.
So special education is expensive, there's no doubt about it. You'll hear every superintendent say that. However, I want to show you this chart just to say that I believe Tiverton does a great job containing those costs. So here's the per pupil cost just for special education, again, with a lot of communities there. And you can see Tiverton squarely in the middle, really, a bunch of communities there, we're all about the same number. We do our best to educate all of as many students as we can in-house, try to reduce those expenses as much as possible. And I think that's important to share that with you, that even though it's an expensive item in our budget, we are trying to maintain and contain those costs as best we can. So I just want to stop here and, again, thank you for your investment in the public schools last year. And say to you that there is starting to be a return on investment. And I think that's important for everyone in this community to recognize that. This chart just shows some small gains in our graduation rate, but our goal is 100%. And I truly believe with the staff and the programming we're putting in place, we can absolutely achieve that. I want to share with you some other successes the schools have experienced just this year. Our high school was placed on the AP District Honor Roll, and you are put on the honor roll. Not many high schools actually achieved this in the entire country for adding more, giving more opportunities for AP classes for students to take, while at the same time maintaining scores in the 3, 4, 5 range, which with a score of 3, 4, 5 in AP, a lot of colleges will accept that for credit. Range's ELA scores on the most recent RIDE tests for both grades 3 and 4 were at the top of the state. Fort Barton's math scores for grade 4 were at the top of the state. At our middle school, we saw growth at every grade level for both math and ELA, and the high school was recognized for having a huge percentage of our students in the highest category on the SAT for ELA. Share with you colleges that our students are being accepted at. Again, this says that from a K-12 system, we can get students through our system, we can educate them to high levels, we can give them great opportunities when they walk across that stage in May. And just some more, culling out some of those schools and showing some of the majors that our students are taking at some of these very competitive universities. The purpose of those last 3 slides is to really instill confidence in you that the system works. It's not the time now to pull the system down. The time now is to continue to invest in the system so we can continue to show you these type of results. So I'm going to return to some numbers here. I've already shared this with you. We know a level staff budget is $35 million. Again, I'll round numbers off. We know that the appropriation, what 4% gets us at 33.1. We've got this deficit of 2.2. We're going to ask the school committee to consider draining down our fund balance in Medicaid funds to $900,000. That would bring that deficit to $1.3 million. So if I'm sitting where you are right now, you're saying, well, how does the school system have a deficit that great? And I'm going to try to answer that question for you and to also eliminate one potential thing that you might think is driving that. So the answer to that question really is in the next slide. There's the funding of the Tiverton Public Schools over the last 6 years. And you can see the increases down at the bottom, 0.6, 0.6, 0.9, 1.1, 5.5.
Reasonable.
Well, it's reasonable except that when special ed, your energy, your health insurance is all going up 10%, and you're funding at 0.6, you force a system of using one-time money. And when those those one-time money is drained away, you're left what's called a structural deficit. You can't fill the gap anymore because you don't have the revenue. The investment wasn't there in the past to sort of keep you on par with just inflation as a whole.
No, that's kind of misleading, because what really pushed it over the top was increases in people that we employ and raises.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that,
We
Joe.
tried to keep it easy on the taxpayers, but you can't keep just, we've been on a steady plane to give increases, and the state's been on a steady plane of giving increases.
So let's take a look at that, and everyone's entitled to their opinion here. And I just want to kind of take that thought, and whether it's a rumor or not, and say to you that, right, we did give our staff some increases in the last contract, and they were certainly well-deserved, and the result of those increases are being shown here. So this is step one, teacher. If you're coming out of college and you have places to go look at, I mean, this is what we're up against. And if you stay with us for 5 years, and you're in your sixth step, that's how Tiverton compares. And if you stay with us your entire career, that's how Tiverton compares. So when I'm going to go out there and try to recruit teachers or try to retain our best and brightest teachers, this is what we're up against. So you can say the raises drove it. I would say to you, those raises were justified and much needed. And they're still keeping us at the low end of the scale for Rhode Island.
Well, obviously, those communities are giving away more than they need to. I mean, it's, somebody's got to be the lowest on the scale. I'm just,
I guess.
Can you speak to, are we losing staff? Are we losing teachers because of because our pay scale is lower among our neighbors?
We have lost a couple teachers just in my short tenure. I can think of 2.
Every year.
So one of the things I want to show the budget committee too is that as the school committee has decided to invest wisely in the infrastructure of the schools and repairing the schools, and you've seen that work, and I'll show you some of those costs momentarily. As a result, through RIDE, there's a 35 to 40% reimbursement, and we certainly go after every dime we can on those reimbursements. So just in the last year, the money that the school department used from fund balance to do the lights and the ceilings at the 2 schools, the town received back $700,000. So I just want to, put that in perspective, that $700,000 came from both the operating budget and from the fund balance, and, we're asking for 986, 4%, and feel like that money has come back in a lot of different ways too. So again, just a fact that, you should factor into is you're understanding what we're looking at here.
About that one. So that 706.75, that was only from the lighting, not the roof and
Anything
other
that
things?
came, that's from anything that was paid for out of the fund balance and or our operating budget, not the bond.
Not the bond, but the bond also has a reimbursement,
It
right?
does.
Correct?
You received that earlier. That was from the earlier part of the project.
Thank you.
So I know another question you're going to have, and we're going to try to answer that question for you right now. So you've heard me talk about our fund balance and our Medicaid account, 2 sources of revenue that have really supported the Tiverton Public Schools over the last several years, which is what has caused the deficit, because again, these are one-time revenue. You use it to plug gaps, but then you don't have any revenue to fill back into it. So what we're going to show you, I'm going to have, again, Amy just describe this to you, is you got the fund balance on the left, you have the Medicaid on the right. We'll take each one separately, but show you where it started. So again, the top line, fund balance on July 1st in 2018 was at $4.2 million. Our Medicaid was at $1.7 million, and you can just track down to the bottom lines and see what's left. So I'll let Amy address that.
I have another question about the fund balance, and I think I've asked this, but where did the money come from to accumulate that balance? And why is there no more, where did that revenue come that you were even able to build that account? And how is there no longer a potential of bringing any more revenue into that account? Where did that come from?
So I think I can answer that question. It was basically favorability starting in about 2012 through about 2016, 17. And then it sort of flattened out. Why did that favorability occur? It was mostly getting control of some special education costs, and in that regard, sort of luck, and that we did not have rising costs. Since 2017, we've had upwards of over $2 million in special education costs rising. And we have not run favorability since FY 2018.
All right, so let's add a little more detail to both these accounts.
So the question that was posed to my office was, well, back at the end of 2018, we had roughly $6 million in quote-unquote reserves, which was composed of fund balance of $4.3 million and Medicaid reimbursement funds that we were eligible to draw down for $1.7. So in terms of fund balance, 2.9 million of the 4.3 million was used in 2019. That was for the lights and ceilings that we talked about, handicap ramps, gym curtains, the school parking lot. But in addition, again, speaking to Dr. Larkin's mention of special education costs, to balance our operating budget, we spent in excess of what was budgeted, $1.15 million. So that brought, at the beginning of fiscal 20, that brought the fund balance down to $1.35 million. And then from there, the school committee worked with Dr. Sanchioni to appropriate one-time expenses, and that kind of go across the board. There was some escrow that was required to go in for former employees' benefits, an additional school parking lot. We also purchased the curriculum Wit and Wisdom. From that, there was a maintenance truck that had to be replaced. And then that $518,000 is, again, to help balance our structural deficit, which is one of the numbers Dr. Sanchioni presented earlier. So we are expecting at the end of 2020 only to have a fund balance of about $460,000. Going to the column for Medicaid, we started with 1.7, and every month we submit for reimbursement for special education students. And in 2019, we received $274,000 of reimbursements. Over the course of the prior 10 or more years, we had accumulated quite a high balance. We had not requested those reimbursements from Medicaid, and due to those excessive special needs costs, we requested a good portion of that balance, bringing it down about $1.2 million to just over $500,000 at June 30, 2018. We're anticipating for 2020 through the rest of the year reimbursements of $340,000. But again, one of the ways we're balancing our structural deficit to offset some of our higher special needs costs is the $597,000, which will leave us, we're thinking, right around $300,000 or a little less at June 30, 2020. And then on the far right-hand side, you can see the totals for that. So we went from $6 million. 2019 is where we had the big jump in our expenses, and we also invested in some capital projects or improvement projects, and dealing with the structural deficit that started, as Dr. Larkin mentioned. So we're expecting about $750,000 to be remaining at June 30, 2020.
Just before we leave the slide, I think there's 3 important points that also have to be made. So just reviewing my sort of records here, FY 17 was the last year that the fund balance grew, and then in the last 2 years it has decreased, partly through expenditures, partly through increasing costs, so that we had less favorability in the budget overall. But on average, it was about $600,000 per year from 2012. The Medicaid, 1.7 million, that grew over a total of about 12 years, and that was at about $150,000 per year. Some years we actually did draw down from that, but on average it was about that. And each year the school committee chose to have that money allocated back into the fund that was held in the special education district.
Can you say why?
Because it was essentially a rainy day fund for special education, and so it seemed wise to leave it there for the rainy days that came.
Has Tiverton encountered cases in which you've suddenly been there have been new students that come to the district that would cost
That's ex-
200,000,
Yes.
500,000, something?
And that's
and that
exactly
is
why
that
it's
why?
there. So our, again, our special education costs since FY 2017, I'm gonna say, is risen about 2.2 million. Have I got that right? So about $2 million, so. So basically what you are seeing is using of one-time funds to account for that because those costs rise unpredictably, as you can, as is maybe is obvious. And they rise after a budget's been passed or after an allocation has been made. So, it can happen at any time during the school year.
And just as we're on that topic of out-of-district placements and costs of special ed, in your budget book, in the back section, I think we call it other information, we actually gave you a sanitized version of our out-of-district placements, so you don't see any, obviously, student information, but you see the school and you see the cost, and you can see how it's sort of grown over the years, and you can, again, see the impact that it has on our budget.
Also, one other factor in special education, the age for which services need to be provided has gone up 1 year. It's gone from 21 to 22. So while that's relatively new, there's a year or two in there where we're absorbing yet an extra year. And then that will eventually roll off and smooth out with the number of children coming in versus rolling off. But so that, for the short term, we've had students coming in, but no one falling off the scale.
So to conclude the presentation on our operating request here, I just come back to the numbers we had in front of us. The request is for 4%, and even with that 4%, it's a $2.2 million deficit. We're hoping to offset that and bring it down to about 1.3. And I just have to express this to the Budget Committee, and it's good that you have a budget book in front of you. To cut $1.3 million out of that budget book, which is, again, no new staff, no new programs, just moving everything ahead a year, we would strip every expense account down to bare bone minimum. We would have to eliminate a lot of non-instructional personnel, and then the last thing that anyone ever wants to do is reduce instructional personnel, and I'm saying to you, that's the impact. Even with 4%, we're gonna cut teachers, we're gonna cut people who are directly working with staff this year under those circumstances. So we also have,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah.
Even with the 4% budget, you will be cutting teachers?
with the 4% budget, the number in red there is still our deficit. And again, the reason why you have your budget book, go through it, try to find 1.3 million. You're not gonna find it. You strip our expense accounts, go to the people who are not teaching students. You can find a few positions there. They're still important, don't get me wrong. It forces us to go into teachers and to people who are directly working with kids. There's just not enough room in that budget. It's never been an inflated budget. It's always been a bare bones budget as far as doing the right things by students, and it's a tough predicament to be in right now. So, Ms. Chair, I don't know if you want to stop there. I know we want to talk to you a little bit about capital too, but probably a good time to break and just talk about the operating budget.
Yeah, Jay, if I could.
And actually, if I could just make one more point about that slide with the fund balance and the Medicaid. So part of the reason that fund balance grew was also because there were years where we actually allocated capital to the fund balance, anticipating through the facility study and just sort of knowing where we were. The state actually does an assessment of the school buildings based on the square footage and the year they were built and sort of other improvements, and they can sort of tell you where you are in terms of maintenance and actually your, essentially asset protection for the town. That if you don't start to put money into them, you're gonna get into trouble. So some of that money did accumulate as capital appropriations in each budget year. That was also essentially, that was a informal agreement, not in the committee when I was on it, or probably any of you were on the budget committee, although Joe, maybe you were there, that the schools would fund their own capital expenses starting in about 2012. So that was another reason to try and get that fund to grow over those years, was knowing that we had to put meaningful work into the high school and the middle school, and also that we were not going to be asking the town for any capital expenses in that period. So
Just to clarify, you said you put money away or
There were
saved
some years where there was an allocation in our
allocation
budget to
intentionally
capital.
in order not to get in trouble. And when you say not to get in trouble, is that to infer that to keep money set aside so that when you have things that deteriorate, you fix them before it costs you more to fix than it would if you did it immediately?
Both that and knowing that both the high school was built in 66, the middle school in 76. We had a facility study that sort of analyzed the structure and said, this is what has to happen. We knew some of those things were gonna, well, we went to bond for some of those things, primarily the HVAC and the roof, but it was anticipated that there would be other things, such as ceiling tiles, lights, draft walls, pointing, I could go on. So that's where all that money was, where it went, or at least some of it went, and that was the anticipated use.
Do you want us to get involved with, do you want us to ask questions about the operational budget now, or do you want to continue?
We have a
on that?
presentation, the operational budget, so it's up to you if you want to pause here on the operation and go to capital, or I'll leave it to you folks.
What's your
Let them go to
consensus?
capital first.
Just keep going.
Yeah, let them keep
Just
going.
move on to capital, and
That's where all my questions are anyway, so.
I'm sure we're all gonna have a lot of questions.
Capital.
So capital, I know I speak for the school committee, the administration, everyone here who represents the Tiverton Public Schools. This is secondary. That budget I just showed you, the operating, we'd give up everything on this list to fund the operating budget. Because the operating budget, where the way it's currently constituted with 4% in the deficit, if you could go beyond that, would save teachers. And we'll find a way to live with this. But these are true needs also. But I want to make that point crystal clear. Our operating budget is our priority. So the things we prioritize, in your budget book, you have a capital list. It's a 5-year plan. You have everything that's on there as far as the needs of the Tiverton Public Schools, so you know that we're looking at this, we're planning ahead, we're trying to be proactive as we look at our facilities. The things we pulled out for FY21 are the following. The continued refurbishing of the bathrooms at the middle school and the high school, and we'll show you some pictures momentarily. Front steps at the middle school, siding and power washing at Ranger, a door at Fort Barton that doesn't secure quite well. Continuing to work on the tennis courts, a small amount of money, but it's sort of one of these things you do it now before it gets worse. Kitchen equipment that's circa 1968 that needs to be replaced, a van, and we'll give you the rationale for a van, and continue with our technology program, Chromebook replacement. So moving forward, quick pictures, the steps at TMS, these steps we have to cone off right now. They're sort of a security risk and hazard. They're in tough shape. Those are right in the front of the school. Bathrooms, so this is a bathroom at the high school. You can see, again, it's 1968. And just showing you here, again, want to thank the Budget Committee. Again, you allocated money in capital for us to begin the project of refurbishing bathrooms. So we are in the process right now of doing 2 at the middle school, 2 at the high school. So this is showing you the renovation. They will be complete and operational on May 1st.
Cast iron plumbing.
Yeah. This is the bathroom at the middle school.
How many bathrooms total were there?
Total bathrooms in the schools?
They have to be, that you're renovating.
We're currently renovating 2 at the middle school and 2 at the high school. And we're asking to do 2 more at the middle school, 2 more at the high school.
Which is one ladies' room and one
Correct.
boys' room in each school.
In each school.
Right. And then, like at the middle school, each grade level has one. So
Yeah.
grade 5 has one.
We have, so 8 total we want to
Sweet.
fix over time, yeah. Again, picture of
Sorry.
the high school. Control it. And this is a bathroom at the middle school. That's, again, needs to be replaced. Yes. It's great showing you this picture because the paint there, that was done by a group of educators, our principal and parents, just to try to make it a little nicer for our students, and they did an excellent job with that. The floor there, that's the middle school again. Kitchen equipment, so we have an amount there. I wanted to show you specifically what it'd be used for. All that equipment was purchased in 1968. The dishwasher barely functions anymore and leaks an amazing amount of water on the floor on a daily basis. The walk-in cooler doesn't hold the temperature that it's supposed to for the food that's stored there. We've been cited a few times on that. We try to keep it alive as best we can. And the warmers, where you do some of the cooking of the food, again, they're 1968. They just don't function very well anymore. There's the dishwasher, and you can see, anything that's lasted since '68, you got to pay it its dues. I mean, I don't think they build them like that anymore, so it's certainly served the school department extremely well.
This dishwasher floods the floor of that room
Yeah.
every day, is that correct?
Every day. So you see that black mat there? That would be underwater at the end of the day after all the cooking is done. That's the front door of Fort Barton. It just doesn't latch appropriately anymore. And we feel like that's becoming a security risk, which is why it's on the list for us here. This is a Ranger. We'll give you a closer picture of the siding that's starting to pull apart. And this is one of those things you can do it now and really catch the cost before it really escalates to a point where you're pulling apart the entire wall there. And that's the mold that's on the building. A quick check of the siding and cleaning off the mold, again, would serve it well before it got a lot worse. So the van is a request we have here. You saw our numbers for transportation. It goes up 8% on an annual basis. We pay a lot to transport kids all over the state. And a van, we're thinking now, and I think I had spoken to some people who came on the trip to us. We were talking about using it for special education, but then I want to show you the cost. We'd have to hire a driver. And for our long trips that are most expensive, for example, $50,000 to take a kid up to Waltham, Massachusetts every day, we'd offset that with a driver, so the gain isn't there anymore. But we did a complete analysis of our sports teams, and we've calculated based on this year's schedule, if we have that van, we would reduce our buses by 23,000, and that's just the high school. So we start adding in the middle school sports that don't correspond with the high school. We feel that number could be up to 30,000 plus, and then we'd also have it available during the day for small field trips. So, it would automatically, I would say to you, $30,000 a year in savings. We wouldn't have to hire a driver. We'd ask our coaches to get their chauffeur's license, which allows them to drive the van. So it's an immediate savings, and over 2 or 3 years, it's already come out of the red into the black.
And these are trips that are required, right? The special education, we are obligated to make sure our kids get to their classes that aren't available here in Tiverton.
That is correct. That is correct. So that's the capital request, and I'll just take it back to the first slide that has the items and the cost. And many of you came on the tour, and we were appreciative of that, so you've seen this, and I think you have a good understanding of why we're asking for these things. But again, I'll close by the way I started saying that's secondary to the operating budget. We trade it all in to maintain our staff.
Peter, can I ask about one item that's on here that I don't think was on the original one that I saw? Chromebook replacement?
Right.
Why are those online to be replaced if they were new this year?
We didn't, there's one grade level that we didn't, that isn't new. And we did that purposely to try to keep the cost down this year, thinking that we would be able to replace that grade this year in our budget. And when we stripped all our expense accounts, it seems like a capital request anyways. It seems like this is maybe a more appropriate place to place it. And so that's why it's there.
And was the bathrooms 300,000 last year?
They were, but what we're learning, as I'm going through the replacements now, as one of you said, those old pipes behind there are causing a lot of havoc, and they're having to do a lot of extra supports and build a lot of extra functions, so the cost has escalated, and so we want to budget it more appropriately.
Is that what the cost is coming in at for the
Yeah.
four that are being done is 350?
Yeah, closer to that, yeah.
Thank you.
Going around, or what are we doing?
Well, let's start with Jennifer.
Thank you. I'd like to end
because we're on this. That last, could you go back on the van? So the request is for 75,000 for the vehicle only?
Correct.
Right.
Yes, it has to have special, it's not just buying a van, you have to have special seat belts and special features to transport students, but
Fair
yes.
enough. And then, but trying to understand, because there's a lot around operational costs. The operational costs for that van would be,
The maintenance and the insurance, right.
and given savings through other things, that's how you feel. And if we had a capital approval for 75 grand for a van, your ability to fund other things, insurance and maintenance, you could capture through savings?
Or from the savings of the van itself. So say the van saves us 30,000, what I would do is I'd take our transportation budget, drop it by 25, and put 5,000 aside for those other two things there.
So we're not building in, if we got a van, we're gonna be able to put people and insure it and maintain it.
Mhm.
Right, we're
Yes.
not looking, we don't need additional operational costs if we get a van.
Correct. You're right on target.
Can I go to the operational?
Yes.
So I just wanna, yeah, it would be great to understand. So you're looking at a $2.2 million deficit. It's probably like the 5 or 6 from the end. And you're saying you'll reduce that deficit by taking money out of the fund balance of 400,000 and out of the Medicaid fund, $500,000. So you have 1.3 left still to close. And you're gonna close that 1.3 through this list of specifics that you have here. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know, maybe we can talk about that 1.3. If you guys are generous, we wouldn't have to
Right.
use
You're
that.
saying if we did a 4%, you still need to cut these
Yes.
things to make things
Yes.
work. You'll draw down about $900,000 from fund balances, and you'll make $1.3 million a cut from what is.
That's the only way to balance that.
So you, sorry.
Is that,
Yes.
Jen?
So I'm sorry, I'm just flipping to the back of the packet right now, where it's showing expense reductions and non-instructional
So
staff
that's
reductions.
a fluid list, and it asks you not to focus too deeply on that right now. I'm actually, that wasn't the presentation you were supposed to get. I don't know
So,
why.
yeah, so my question was, are these on,
Your slide should have ended on our
Okay.
last slide. But so anyways, so you have it, you look at it, actually please to keep it to yourselves, because there's people on there that we want to see how the numbers turn out before we inform these people, and they haven't been yet, and that would not be professional of us.
these would be the impact reductions?
That is the best thinking of the administration right now. The school committee still has to work with us on that.
Okay.
We need to return these papers to you.
That'd be nice.
Yep, okay.
We'll get that.
But can I just say something about that, actually? That is what we are struggling with. We cannot fund those things without going over 4%, which is what we're limited to. So the administration has sort of looked at this and the principals with the school improvement teams, and the school committee is struggling with how to set those priorities, because none of those choices is going to be easy.
But you have it, so great, look at the impact. You also have our budget book, so, that's how we're finding 1.3 million, and so you see the drastic impact. And it's something we'd like to avoid.
Can I ask about substitutes?
Sure.
So in the beginning of the presentation, it was talked about the need for substitutes and that there's an issue with finding substitutes. How much are we using substitutes? Why are we using that amount of substitutes?
So what we showed you was an increase in our sub-account, and you can find that for me, but So the sub-account, what we try to always do is budget to actuals, and so the increase we're showing you there is just matching to it. The account for the last several years has been, severely underfunded. Why, I don't know, but we want to bring it up to a number that matches to what we're seeing on an annual basis. The sub-account is for just that reason, when teachers are sick, when teachers are taking a personal day or a professional development day.
Thank you for the presentation. So I wasn't on the budget committee last year, but I was on it the year before. So 2 years ago, there was a level fund request that came from the schools. You weren't here then. So there's a little bit of an elephant in the room, okay? Usually before you're gonna say something negative, you usually say something positive, all right? I'm a salesman, I do it for a living, and I'm told the reverse all the time, right? So back in 2015, as a parent that probably didn't know anyone in this room, I don't think I know anyone in this room, I fought for all-day kindergarten for this district. The school committee that year voted 5-0 to not implement it because they didn't have the money. But they had a big balance. And I'm not gonna say what wording some people use for the balance, but it was there, okay? And it caused a lot of distrust because even I caught a lot of flack trying to get money out of the district for this all-day kindergarten. It was the right thing to do, and I had skin in the game because my kid was going into kindergarten. It was very personal for me. So now, 5 years later, I'm very involved. I know most of the people in this room, one way or another, and I am a supporter of the schools. In fact, Jen and I started a quest together back then to start trying to get more involved, get parents involved. And we have kids in the schools, so it means a lot to us. However, the problem with sitting on a budget committee is everyone needs more because costs are rising. And I agree, one thing we have a problem with in town, whether it's the firefighters or it's our police or our teachers, we're underpaid. We could stack that every year and look at all these other communities. We're never gonna be the top. We struggle to get to the middle. We just don't wanna be in the basement, okay? 2 years ago, I was laid off from my job. I worked for 14 years for a company, and it wasn't personal, but sometimes it happens, and I lost my job. But I rebounded, and I got something else, and I'm very happy now. So the reason why I tell you a little bit about the background of myself is I'm here. We don't get paid to do this for the Budget Committee. I don't get paid to be a member of the PTO. I don't get paid to coach any sports or be involved. The things I do are to make the community a better community. And I would like to do everything you're asking to do if it benefits our children. However, we're at a crossroads where, we meet with the police chief, we meet with the fire chief, and they're begging for pennies to implement safety things or our trash that we have a problem with because of landfill. So all I want to say is I appreciate your presentation. We know there's a lot of work to be done. However, there's got to be a middle ground that we have to figure this out because in the past, before your arriving here last year, we could have done things better as a community, and I don't think we always did. So we have a chance to either come together now to do the right things. I'm just not sure with this structural deficit you have and this capital. I mean, it's a big ask. It's a big home run for the town. And I'm a guy that is totally supportive of the schools, but this is hard. It's a hard spot to be in. It's probably not easy for you guys to be in either.
No, the alternative's hard too, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, As a parent, I want to have the best school system for my kid. I want my kid to go, I saw Xavier on that list. I want my kid to go to a good school, and I want my kid to be a product of our schools. I was a product of a public school, and I think I did it right. So anyway, in closing, I'm sorry I took so much time to say it, but I'm hoping we get to a middle ground. Last year, I wasn't on the budget committee. I put a lot of time walking neighborhoods and doing things to get people to come out and vote for an alternate budget. And that alternate budget, honestly, was to give more money to the schools last year, like 90% of it. We're in a different situation this year. We got to find a way to make it work. So That's, I just want to say that I realize the situation you're in now. I appreciate you spending on the fund balance and doing the bathrooms and doing some of the things that needed to be done, but there was a long time where it wasn't being done. And people, when you knock on their door and you ask them to support something, sometimes they're very agitated or they're not happy, and, you know, you try to do the best you can. So I'm gonna do the best I can. I appreciate everything. Thank you, guys.
Along those notes, well, at first I thought the van was a win-win, but then I got to thinking about it. Is it gonna have to be handicapped accessible?
No.
Why not?
Well, it only is required to be that under, I don't know, we looked up the laws, and I can send it to you, Jay. I don't have it memorized, but I can say to you no, because we researched it.
Well, let me ask you another way. If we
We'd have to if it's, for example, if we use it for sports, and there was a handicapped student on that team, we'd have to provide them transportation. So that might shift us to use a different form of transportation. But if we're taking the boys' tennis team and there's no one handicapped on it, we can use that van. So
All right.
equal access and
I
opportunity.
understand you want to be able to use it for those ancillary uses.
Right.
But if we have a handicapped kid who has to go to wherever, you're not going to be able to use that van.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make on that is we're shifting our thinking on using it for that reason. If we use it for the special ed transportation, we have to hire that driver. And that, we have to, right. And so-
From the bus company.
Well, from anywhere. So the number I showed you up there is what the bus company would pay a driver for 180 days to do those long trips. And I imagine we'd have to be competitive. I mean, we can try to cut it, but we're not gonna get much lower than that. So what I was trying to express to the budget committee was, I'm not sure that's the best use of that van. I think if we just use it for the sports and can save $30,000 on sport team buses, because we can have our coaches drive and not have to pay for that, and then use it for field trips and things like that, where we're hiring buses during the school year for small groups like that, again, we wouldn't have to hire a driver. I think our savings would be greater.
Because the next question I was going to ask you is, if it's making these long trips, then it's going to be closer to $120,000 to buy, drive, repair, put tires, buy gas, and everything else.
Right, good point.
To be honest.
Yep.
And that might even be a little low. All right, Jerry said you have to keep your budget down below 4%. Well, actually, the town does. You're 3/5 of the budget. If you get more than 4%, we're over the cap. We also have to fund the town. Like Mike said, police, fire, all those other things. So even though we might want to give you everything you want and probably need, it just can't happen. Another point, the average citizen in this room is lucky to get a 2 to 3% salary increase in any year. And that's been going on for quite some time. School salaries, 6.8. Benefits, 8%. This is unsustainable. We can't do it. Property taxes, property values aren't going up exponentially unless you live in a ranch in the north end of town.
Jay,
We
are
have
you
a-
taking the 6 off my slide here?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay, so that's a lot of factors that are in there. It's not just a raise. I just want to make that
So I
point.
did a little research, just to give you an idea, or everybody an idea of what we're dealing with. 16% supposedly of the population of Tiverton is over the age of 65. This is data I got off of the internet.
I'm pretty close.
The average age in Tiverton is 49. The average age to collect Social Security is 62. The most you can collect on Social Security at 62 is $2,200. If you go to 67, it's 28 and change. So if you do the math, you'll find out Oh, and then the average citizen on Social Security is getting about $1,500 a month. So if he's living in a $300,000 house in Tiverton, and he's making about $17,000 a year before Medicare, he's giving 25% of his income to taxes. This is, it's unsupportable. How can they do it? And as we all know, the boomers are here. I'm one of them. You're getting more and more. We have an aging population. They only have so much money. Some people say, oh, well, we need to attract young families and all that. Well, we all saw what it costs to educate one normal student. Property taxes don't come close to paying for that one student. And if you have 2 kids, you're way out of the ballpark, and if you have 3, you're on the moon. It's just the way it is. So, you know, we have to.
Sorry, I don't understand the point you're making.
If I have a house and I have no children, I'm paying, what, $4,500 a year in taxes. That's just property taxes. That's not vehicle taxes. That's not, you know, Tiverton Water District taxes, any of those things. That's just straight Tiverton property tax in a $300,000 house, more or less. If now, same house, same person, one child, I have them in school. Cost about $10,000, $12,000 to educate that one child.
17.
I'm only paying $5,000 or $4,500 of property tax. Doesn't even come close. If I have 2, it's even worse. If it's 3, it's even worse. So to me.
So are you suggesting we should have a town ordinance and limit,
No,
tell
I'm
people
just
how many
making the
children they should
point.
have?
I'm just making the point.
55 and older.
No. No, the point I'm trying to make is,
That's done in China.
But
with an aging population,
Make the whole town 55 and older?
with a limited income, we cannot keep on escalating the cost of the town. We need to control it. That means everybody has to share the pain. Schools, fire. Now, we've already been through all the municipal stuff, and the average department is doing like 2%. There's only 2 employees in the whole town that have asked for 4% raises. Now, you can do what you want with all that information. I'm just throwing it out there to illustrate the problem.
I
And
think,
then don't forget the elephant in the room, the capital for the landfill. And I've said all I'm gonna say.
Great, I get to follow you.
Long-winded as I am.
I've sat through your presentation 3 times, and I don't envy you. I don't envy me. Not because I sat through it, but because we have to make choices here. But I do appreciate that you have made changes with each one, so I know you're working on this. I know you're all struggling with that. As you're talking about the teachers' salaries, for so many years, we did not pay them, we did not give them raises. So we gave them a great raise in the last contract, but it was to make up, and they're still not made up. So, you know, that's what we had to do. If we have failing schools, our houses they're not worth what they are. So we need to have good services in our town. We need to have good schools. I support it. I feel. My kids are no longer in the school, but somebody paid for my children, and I'm paying back now. Someday, hopefully, grandchildren, and we'll pay again. But thank you for taking us to look at all of these capital items. Bathrooms are always top because they're the same bathrooms I used when I was in school. I'm thankful they're being changed. The front steps of the middle school is an accident waiting to happen. The siding, the interior doors, The kitchen equipment, they cooked our hot dogs on that when I was in the high school. So the floor being wet with the dishwasher is another accident waiting to happen. That's hard tile and one slip and fall. I work with personal injury. It's a big cost liability. The Chromebooks we did not talk about. We did talk about the van. The Chromebooks we didn't talk about. So my understanding is that we purchased Chromebooks for, was it all of the students?
5 through 12.
5 through 12. So what is this replacement? Is that to replace some of those, or is that to purchase for younger grades? Or?
No, so we didn't purchase every student 5 through 12. We kept a lot of our older machines there because we wanted to maintain the costs as low as possible. And so our seniors have machines that are really on their last legs. And the idea was we would hang on to them one extra year, get rid of them, and then the students would have their Chromebooks, they'd keep it with them, and this would be for the 5th grade, and sort of to sustain it. And then we would have new, and we could probably hold it for a couple years, and then we'd have to get back to sustaining it again. So it's trying to take an initial high cost and then bring it down, sustain it on a more reasonable level.
Okay. So is there any grant money available?
If there is, we go after it, I'll assure you.
Because I think we used grant money, didn't we, last year for some of the Chromebooks?
We've used it for other things in technology. Typically, there's no grants for you to allow, because every district's purchasing computers, right? It's the same need everywhere, so I haven't seen any grants for that specific purpose. There are other technology things you can go after.
All right, I thank you, and I know you're still struggling and still working on this, as we all are. It's a tough budget season, as everyone's alluded to, but we'll try to support you as well as we can. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions on special education kids. Ultimately, I want to ask if there's a way to invest early to reduce the number of special educations that we get later. So do we own our special ed kids right from kindergarten? What
Third grade.
percentage?
I
What
mean,
percentage?
Third birthday.
Third birthday.
Yep, from third to third, as Amy said to you, now we own them till the 22nd birthday. So if they need services through those years, that's the responsibility of a public school system.
I
So
see.
we start our preschool in
Yeah.
third grade. It's a free preschool for
Yeah.
any student needing those services.
Yeah. What's the, I don't know, the retention rate of a special ed kid? So we own. like,
Our percentage
what's-
stays about the same, so it's usually between 14 and 16% of our student population, but it's not, the students come in and out, right? The idea is to, a lot of times we hope to remediate these issues, get students to be more self-sufficient, build some resiliency, but it depends on what the issue is, right? If you're,
Yeah.
an autistic child, you're gonna be an autistic child for all 22
Right.
years we have you, and that
Yeah.
service is gonna remain.
Right. Is our program so good that we're attracting people from out of town?
Well, if we are, we charge them, so I'll share that with you.
Yeah.
We
All
do
right.
collect a few tuitions.
Right. Okay. All right, I guess that's all I have. It's a tough year. It's a great presentation. You really
Hopefully it's
approached it very
transparent.
well. Yep, very transparent. Thank you.
Well, I don't know where to begin. There's so much here. Everything Jay said, first of all. I mean, when I talk about this definition of success in any endeavor, like a company or a hospital or anything really, it's what do you get for the money that you put in, okay? If you can do it with less money, you're a bigger success. If you have to have more and more every year, that's not as big a success, okay? And it's unsustainable. That's number one, okay? So just that overview, and I'm very pro-education, but I just don't believe that it's all about money. Even the teachers' salaries, okay? This is a lovely little town. Maybe you don't want to live or teach in a huge city that's rat racy and lots of problems, more problems. I mean, it's first of all, it's just not all about the money, okay? The teachers must be able, and I'm not judging here, I'm just letting you know what I think. Teachers need to be able to teach and inspire, whether they're getting $60,000 or $70,000, a year. Whatever. I mean, it's just not. It should not always be about just the money. So it's part of it. It's part of it, but it's a different town. That leads me on to my other, you're always comparing to all the other towns. It's not a direct comparison. Another town might have a lot of crime. Another town might have a lot of high-rises and traffic and danger on the road. There's just all kinds of different criteria. This town is a lovely little town for a kid to grow up in. So, go ahead. I didn't know if you had a response to that. I didn't know. It's just, I know when I say it's
I
not.
just ask you to go back and maybe look at those 3 bar charts we provided you. Every town on there is a lovely little town too. And you talked about, or you made the comment that the increase in salaries, they're still the lowest paid in the state. So
That's fine. Okay, I understand. Somebody has to be lowest, and it might be the little town here, because we have
there's a lot of little towns that do a lot better, and you know, we're not asking, you made the comment, it's more, and I'm trying to impress to you, it's not more. We're asking for level service, level staff. I'm not asking for any more, I'm asking just to
No, more
sustain.
money you're
No,
asking
but
for.
That's the business we're in, of sustaining where we're at.
Again, keep that definition of success, because it's definitely, if you have a manager on a project in anything, even the town administrator, if he does it with less money, he's going to be retained longer, okay? So I'm just saying, that's a total definition of success, part of it. Then the raises issue, and somebody mentioned that they hadn't gotten any raises for many years, and that's true. I don't know exactly how many years it was, but how many?
In the school district,
Yeah,
5 years
it was
and
about
zero.
5 years, zero, okay. So just so you know, the rest of the country was the same. In general, there were decades of bad economy, decades, or I should say, not decades, a decade or so, I meant, yeah. There was there was quite a many years with a bad economy that has now started to come up in general. Okay, so I understand that, but everybody else has the same issue. Many people I know in the corporate world even. So I just want to put a little, give a little understanding to the zero raises and some of the financial parts of it. It isn't the entire picture. It isn't the entire picture. The rest of these are just kind of going to be random. You talked about the return on investment, and, I had a question for you. We're right near Boston, right? How close are we to Boston? 1 hour. Isn't Boston one of the most progressive school areas in Brookline, Mass. It's the top ranked. Talking about the Brookline has a very highly rated.
I agree with you, and I would say to you, as a 13-year superintendent in Massachusetts,
Right, you have-
funding formula is completely different.
That I understand, and I'm with you. We're talking about the funding formula. I understand that, and I'm totally with you on that, as the town council is, to try to help. But the return on investment is, our rankings are just not really going up. I'm hoping they will, because that's your plan, Superintendent Sanquioni. That I'm excited about. But at the moment, I think where we're at with all the difficulty in the funding is, can we see that first? Can we see that there's everybody graduating? Can we see that more people are getting to better schools? We don't have any Ivy League schools. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not pro Ivy League. I'm just saying, we have a lot of success, but I think if we saw that first, a little bit more, then I think we would feel better about the success also. Is there a max you're going to take a sped student to? Is Waltham even possible for us? And what's the maximum mileage that you would take
Depending
someone?
on the service.
Yeah.
So certain schools only cater to certain, and that's the closest one that student needs.
For what one?
With that student's disability, that school
okay.
is the closest one for what that student needs.
Is that state mandated that you have to go there then?
It's state mandated, we have to meet that student's need. It's actually
Okay.
federal.
Okay, thank you. And it does remind me that I guess it was kind of late last year. Just wanted to mention, maybe you can, if you want to respond, we had a certain number of special ed students, and then it went up to 11. It must have been 8, and then it went up to 11 in May or April or something like that. So it looks like to me that those 3 extra students, which are important, I know, would be the 1.3 million that you're talking about on that was unexpected deficit, no? Doesn't, No?
We can't share a lot of information like that, and I don't think you can
Okay.
make that correlation.
Okay, thank you, just making
because
sure. Okay, thank you.
You run the risk of de-identifying.
Yeah, that's okay, I just was wondering, it looked like it was similar at cost,
We
so.
identify.
Okay, thank you. How long do Chromebooks last for the kids, and is there much damage on them from the kids, you think, or is it?
We're anticipating 5 to 6 years.
And do they have insurance, like if a kid drops it and breaks it or something? I
We
mean,
have bumper-to-bumper warranty on the devices for a couple
Okay.
of years.
thank you. The one-time money spending, that does bother me a little bit, because as you know, like you said, you do it one time now, and then how are you gonna fund it next year and next year and next year? I would be really careful with one-time spending if it was me. I'm just saying, I don't know, you're nodding your head, so you're the financial person, right? So, that leads me on to the van. You say you can fund it, but is that gonna be funded easily every year from now until the end of the life of the van, and you have to buy a new van or whatever? I mean, because you're gonna have to driver every year, gas every year, and that's every year, you're talking more than just 1 year, right? Superintendent, thank you.
Right, I think after a couple of years, the savings in transportation would equal the cost of the maintenance and the van itself, and then every year after that, it's just
better.
straight savings.
Okay, good, thank you for mentioning that. Just a few random things here. I'm sure the washer's been, you've tried to repair it a million times. Okay, I can't repair it anymore. Okay.
Can't get the parts anymore.
Okay, that's good, thank you. And I thought that when I understood the bathrooms, we only saw 2 in our site visit, was it last year or the year before, whenever I assumed that when we gave the money for the bathrooms, that would be it. You know what I mean? That was the bathrooms that were needed, that we were shown, and that we gave the money for the bathrooms. So I was a little surprised to see that there was another $350K for bathrooms. And, maybe you could give us, like you did now, you told us there's 8. That I would have liked last year, because I didn't know there were 8 in every building, so every school, of the 2 schools. Does that mean that it'll be 4 years total of 300 to 350,000, right? Is that basically it?
Ideally, every bathroom, the high school bathrooms are all original to 68, and the middle school bathrooms are original to 76, so.
Right.
They're just,
And I understand about the pipes and all the
right.
things that can't be fixed, but I do have a belief that a 1965 or 6 school can be maintained. So I'm a proponent, I don't know if other people have mentioned it, of the maintenance, so that you don't let the lichen or the mold or whatever it is grow on the siding. You have a regular maintenance schedule that, I don't know who your maintenance person is, but it seems like they would be doing this maybe once a month or something if it started. I mean, like all of us do on our seaside homes. So you do have a maintenance schedule and everything, right? That is okay. Okay. That's all my questions. Just a big concern, like others, but.
I want to first say that I am been impressed over the last 6 years with the school committee, the way they've handled the problems in the school, the building committee that went on. They did a complete analysis of the facility, cost estimates, went out to bid, pulled the money out of my pocket and Jay's to get the job done, and the reason I voted for it, because I think you did the job professionally, and that goes out to the school committee, because I know you put a lot of time in to make sure. So I'm going to continue to support the capital requests. Only question I really had was on the van. Had you considered leasing the van versus purchase? It might be worth looking. Only because at the back end of the life of the van, the maintenance things start to go up, and there's no value left, so sometimes a lease is more economic. Just something to look at. The only other thing is I didn't make it to the site visit, but I actually have a Google Map program that I can use where I can actually look live time at all the roofs and stuff at the schools. And I think we're starting to, I can remember in I'm not going to say the exact year, sometime in the 90s, standing in the backside of the auditorium behind the stage, and there was a hole in the hardwood floor. And I said, what was that? And they said, that's where the roof has been leaking for 10 years. And it had literally went through the hardwood floor to the concrete below. I don't think that hole's still there, but that's what that was the point in my life when I said, we're gonna be floating bonds until I'm gray in the head if we don't start getting ahead of this. So just a compliment that I think things have turned around in our public buildings as far as schools, and that's it.
First, I'm sorry I didn't make it to the presentations, but I was watching, and I appreciated seeing the teachers giving the awards to the students and hearing the poems that were read. I really enjoyed it. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there. I really don't have a lot to say. I agree with a lot of questions were answered by previous people. As it stands, we have several upcoming mandatory costs that are going to require reduction in other spending or to use increased revenue, more than likely. And I would love to be able to say that I think I expressed this last year, and I'll just say it again. I think that we as a budget committee, the school committee does a good job. It shouldn't be our job to decide or to talk about. I don't think we should even be worried about what you're deciding to pay for with the money that you get, because you're doing that. That's what the school committee's for, and they're doing a good job. So if we had extra revenue and not a huge increase to extra individual property tax burden, it would be nice to be able to see the split, some sort of town split for the town to get to a point where they figure out how to take half the revenue and give it to capital and the other half to the school. That's what I'd like to see. But again, I know that this year is going to be really hard because of the landfill and other things that are coming up. And we can't spend what we don't have or commit to spending what we won't have in the future. So we have to look at all of it. But I think you guys have done a great job, and I appreciate everything that you've given us, all the information you've given us.
Jay, can I speak?
Sure.
Can you clarify what percentage do we spend on special education compared to the whole budget? About 25%, about a quarter, okay. And then how much has special ed gone up? How much of that quarter of the budget, how much has gone up?
Annually from year to year, or just?
This last year, well, both, 5 years ago, and then what happened to us last year?
Bear with me one second.
Okay.
I have the notes here.
So I would say 2.3 million, although I'm going to let Amy correct me.
I'm sorry, so our special ed went up,
From FY 2018, because that's really what we're.
okay.
So, the thing about education, I don't know why I'm answering this question, because maybe I shouldn't, but the thing about special education is that there's a lag. So what we're actually dealing with more than anything else is the increases since FY 18. That was sort of the last year where we kind of closed the books in sort of a reasonable way. We had big increases in 2019, big increases in 2020, that totaled about $2.3 million. Correct me.
Right, from 18.
Yeah,
yes.
from 18.
Okay.
And then each year, subsequent 19, 20, 21, it's anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million per year that it's increased in just those 3 years alone.
Okay.
So when the budget for FY20 was set, we didn't have books closed. We had no idea. We did not yet know how FY '19 was going to end, and it ended substantially negative compared to FY '18 in special education.
So the reserves that you had from years past, you've spent on rising costs. And so part of our problem this year is that because there wasn't enough money to fund it, reserves were used to fund it. So suddenly we've popped up to this huge number. So the reason why we're seeing this big 4% in our school budget is because this was brewing, but we didn't really know where the numbers are. So it's not that it didn't exist. This is something that we've had to pay. We've been paying, but it wasn't. It isn't.
One-time money.
And it isn't. But it's not reflected in the actual. In our. It's a misnomer to say that the budget is going up by 4%, right? Because it was
Right.
it was there
Correct.
anyway, but so we were saying, oh wow, this is 4%, but it wasn't 4%. It's actually it wasn't reflected in.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the first year, and another way of putting that is that because of the budget cycle, because those increases began between FY '18 and FY '19, this is the first year that we're actually able to address this in operations.
Okay.
The other 2 fiscal years, 19 and 20, we have to close with those reserve balances.
Okay, and so it's not because you're flamboyantly saying, "Oh,
No.
we
No.
need 4%." It's
if we-
because of this accounting issue
if we had-
and
if we
how we're
could've-
able to see it over time.
Another way to put it is that if we could have predicted these increases, okay, we would have built the FY '17 and '18 budgets in a way that sort of gave us more modest increases.
That could correspond to the actual
Right.
cost.
So if there's 2 points that you should really walk away with this, this is one of them, okay? That it's the special education rises, and that we can't address those for probably 2 fiscal years once they've occurred. The second is related to it, which is that it's not the total budget that I think we should really be thinking about, and at least in some regards, it's actually the local levy. If you look from FY '12 to FY '15, the local levy went up between $500,000 and $600,000 every year. Beginning in FY 2016, the local levy was increased by $14,000. $14,000 out of a $23.4 million total appropriation. In FY '17, the local levy to the schools went down by $14,000. In FY '18, the local levies to the school went down by an additional $112,000. FY '19 was the first time it went back up. It went back up by $92,000. And then last year, generously, the petitioner's budget passed, and it went up by $1,196,000. But it's that lag of, it's both chronic underfunding and that lag of being able to address this in operations between, it takes probably 2 fiscal years. And sadly, it's not going away. Unless suddenly our special education costs go down, it's not going away. And it's federally mandated that we address, or that we meet those special education costs. So you're squeezing the balloon. And the other part of the balloon are the programmatic things that we can't do because we have to address our special education needs by law.
In 1970 and in 1955, were these kind of costs part of our school budgets in Tiverton?
In
So when I
young
started
then, very,
going
very
to
young.
school, were these parts of our, like Jay has been saying, these
so-
costs are astronomical? What's going on?
The fact of the matter is-
Why should we
right.
be affording?
Special education really
to-
didn't exist in the public schools
Okay.
in those years.
Okay, so our generation is dealing with a very different education economy because of the federal mandates.
Well, and federal aid in general, since 1980, has dropped precipitously.
Okay. How about state aid? How much are we being reimbursed by the state? And will it be more or less this year?
So all of our increases have come from state aid over the last 6 or 7 years. All the total increases in the budget have come from state aid. Increases in state aid, and our current projection, I think, is $321,000. That's the increase in state aid. So there is some.
There is some.
Mind you, that has to be still passed in the budget, but that's the
Okay.
projection.
Okay.
So in FY '20, we received from the state roughly 7.2 million, and proposed to be enacted for '21 is about a little over 7.5.
Okay. I was concerned by one of my colleagues saying, what's happening? You're getting all this money. What are you doing with it? What kind of improvements? And I would like to refer back to one of the pages you gave to us, the return on investment, and that we're seeing a higher graduation rate by 5% since 2017. And then last year, Suzette Wardell, thank you very much. My kids went to Fort Barton. Fort Barton continues to be an incredible school, but we're seeing math and ELA scores go up across the board in our grade schools, our 3 grade schools, our middle school, and our high school. Wow. Rocket ship. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And
And
money
just
well.
because you singled out one principal, I couldn't
Money
allow
well
that.
spent. I don't know the
Yeah, I know.
other
But Manny
principals, the ones
Cabral
that
is
were-
here. Manny, raise your
sorry.
hand.
Thank you all. I don't know
Range is
you.
on that list, and it's up
Um,
there now, and also Sue Craven is here, and the middle school's made amazing gains too.
And then another thing, so we're really not seeing the price change that much. These costs were there. And then the other thing I want to address is this idea, we've already covered that we didn't give teachers an increase in salary for a long time. And if you go back to these sheets, just doing some quick math in my head and trying to divide and look at initial salaries of police, I don't have fire, and then the higher salaries in police, and comparing that to our teachers, both when they start and when they finish, and their different pay scales, you're better off being a police assistant than being a teacher, first step teacher in the town of Tiverton, I think. So I've never seen any analysis done between teacher salaries and police and fire in our town, but maybe it's something we need to take a look at, because I think it's unfair to say, hey, we've given you this big raise and don't ever ask for anything. So I think I'm very concerned, like all of us, of how are we going to pay for all this? But we have to be very careful, because that 4% isn't indicative of, it's not actually 4% new.
Exactly.
It's a couple percent new, and it's mandated, correct? So one last thing is that if we cut our schools, then glancing at some of the pages I was glancing at, I think we can predict that we won't see our students continue to excel in math and ELA, and I think we can expect our graduation rate to go down. So, thank you.
So, as I'm kind of listening to everybody going around, and it's always a hard night when you come before us, because I have seen the presentation many times, and I sit and go, it's just for me, it's just an impossible number this year with that increase. So then you start to go, Like what will be lost? And when we're talking about special education, so those costs will be met because they're required to be met. So what's gonna be lost is the other students and their success rate. And Jay, I will agree with you, as a parent of 2 children in the school system, I am currently getting a bargain for the education that they get. I think sometimes it's very difficult when we sit in these meetings and we're looking at numbers and we're trying to process, and we go and we do site visits, and you can see the cracks in the pavement, and you can see the visual, the door that needs to be replaced. That's all visual, we can get it, that we need to replace that. What we don't see, because we cannot and do not go when school is in session, we do not see these services being provided. We do not see the student succeeding unless you currently have one in your house. We don't see the day-to-day that every teacher is going through, or what that paraprofessional is doing, and what those disabilities are that are being serviced. So I think sometimes it's hard to visualize the impact and the why this money needs to be spent, because we can't see the product, and we can't see the evolution, and we can't see what happens at the end. And I think, as our kids go through, there will be years where, there were years that I paid taxes, that I didn't have children in the system, and then there will be many years after, and I hope that with the education that they're getting, that they become productive members of our community. And I have a child at the middle school. She is an honor roll student. I'm exceptionally pleased with what her teachers have provided with her and the opportunities that she has, and my son as well. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. So a quick point, I have a son that's 27. Yes, I'm 40, so do the math. But he had an IEP when we moved here from Newport in 2004. We bought our house here. And he was in 6th grade at the middle school, and he was reading on a 2nd grade level. And he is my stepson. So I only knew him for about a year or two before we got engaged and moved out here. The point is, like Jen is saying, is at the time, my son was a stutterer, and he couldn't read, and he couldn't speak well, and he didn't have a lot of friends. And he now works at Sakuchi Honda. He's a master technician. Very proud of him. He did go to Rogers when he was a senior for high school, VOTEC program. But when he graduated, he was reading on 11th grade level as a senior. And I'm very proud the schools helped him. I have a daughter that's in 4th grade that's, I wouldn't say that's advanced, but she's pretty smart. She's outgoing. If anyone in the room knows her, she'll have a total conversation with you. She'll look you in the eye and ask you millions of questions. And I have a daughter in kindergarten that actually was on IEP a couple years ago because she had some motor skill problems, talking, and now she's in kindergarten. She's a model student. She's actually a pretty smart kid. With that being said, 2 things I want to end on. I won't say anything else. I already said I sponged all my words earlier, but there were years where we didn't give teachers raises year on year. We did level fund. I think before you came here, Dr. Sanquioni, we had a chance to give some raises. It didn't happen. I'm not blaming anyone in particular, but I mean, it's pretty evident they didn't get raises, and we level funded some years. We saw the numbers up there, 0 point something, 0 point something. So we had opportunities to do that. And it's now coming all in one heap now, right? So special ed cost, transportation, right? We know about buses with PTO, how expensive a bus is. We pay $500 to take kids from Becasset over to the high school. I mean, it's like 2 miles.
Which I'll add was parent fundraised.
Right.
Funded.
Right.
And look at how much we, being active in PTOs, how much we, and there are a number of PTO parents here tonight, how much we fundraise, beg community members, everything, so that we can go outside of this budget to continue their opportunities as well.
So the last point I will urge you, and I know I mentioned this to you at the when we took the tour of the school, please look into bringing special ed in-house. Just look into it more. I truly believe that it's worth the look. I mean, I was a school teacher a long time ago for a few years, and I don't know anything about special ed. I never taught it. And I just know from talking to people, I try to do a little bit of homework, second level education, but the people I talked to in Portsmouth say they're doing really well. I know the cost per pupil that you shared for special ed for Portsmouth was higher, but from talking to them, they're really happy with where they are. And they opted out of the program. So I know up front it costs more when you opt out, but eventually they were able to get to a point where managerial, the education they're getting, they're very happy with it. And Portsmouth is just it's a good school system. It's a good district. So, but thank you again. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Jay?
Well, the only comment I'm going to make, other people have mentioned this. Special ed to me is it's a bureaucracy run rampant. It really is. I mean, who would have ever thought that 25% of our entire school budget would be spent on 40 or 50 kids?
About 15% of the students, if you want to do percentages.
All right. Who would have ever thought? And Jennifer, when we were growing up, special ed didn't exist. They were called speds. They were put in a room in the back of the school somewhere with the teacher that wasn't very good. So that kind of thing. Now, they're mainstreamed, you know, whether they belong there or not. There's federal mandates, there's state mandates. Comes off the top. Even before salaries, comes off the top. And they don't reimburse us.
Some would.
Well, they
we
give
get
us some,
a little.
but nowhere near what it costs.
IDA was enacted at 40%. The federal government was supposed to, and it's still on the books, 40%, and it's about 14.
Yeah, so, you know, they control the purse strings, and they don't give us what we need to support their agenda. We didn't create this monster, the feds and followed by the state, did. All right, what can we do about it at our level? Not a damn thing. What can they do about it? If they all get together, like a class action lawsuit almost, you know, 39 school districts in the state lumped together, I'm sure you're trying to do this, to try to compel the people that impose their will upon us to support their programs, which become our programs. Until that happens, we're left with the bill. And the unfortunate thing is, it's like when you're prioritizing building maintenance. Safety comes first, you gotta do it. And then things that are dangerous, you gotta do it. Followed by, well, we'd like to paint. Well, you don't gotta do it because you can't afford it. And that's where we are with the entire budget we have to look at. That's all I'm trying to say. You know, whether we like it or not, we have to support these things, but something's gonna have to go by the wayside. Because number one, we don't have the income base in the town to support it. We don't have, it's unsustainable to keep on having 12, 8, 10% increases in anything, in any department, and keep on just pumping the funds in.
Yep.
Whether, you know, as much as we would want to.
Right. Want to.
need to call our senators.
Well, we got an
Regularly.
interesting comment from one of our state representatives about that. He pretty much said, we don't listen to letters, you gotta come and see us, which I found
At a
shocking.
federal level.
Hmm?
At a federal level.
Oh, on the federal level? Pitchforks and torches. You know? Yeah, but keep in mind, like I said, it's a bureaucracy unto itself, and that they don't really control it either. You try to change it, the courts get involved.
Jay, how did it start to be such a big thing? Why did they, what do they have
It's
a
like
skin in the
any-
game to make more special ed students?
Ask Dr.
like-
Seychelles, ask you.
When did
Dr.
it start?
Lutz.
When did it start?
It's important.
What year did it start, this?
It's important, but it's
This
lost
bureau-
its focus.
Done, but it needs to
Right,
be
because-
federally funded.
One more comment on that. Can I ask a question on it? Special ed, I'm looking at the different ones here on your page, accounts by disability. I mean, I know you make your decisions and I have nothing to say about it, okay? But developmental delay, learning disability, some of these, in the times when we went to school, different levels of kids were in the same class. It didn't seem to, it didn't disrupt it entirely. And I'm just asking the question because I know I'm not the one to make the decision, but is there any way that your teachers could just stretch a little bit with somebody who's not learning at exactly the same pace as everybody else? I mean, because some people, I know about education because I have educators as parents, kids do learn different things at different times. So if there was any way to just, I mean, this is just so different than we had before that.
It is different, Ruth, for a lot of reasons.
You wouldn't have
What
to
you're
buy into
asking
the-
us to do, I can assure you, is happening. Our teachers are exceedingly talented, and we do a lot of inclusion. We try to keep the lowest cost factor. But, you know, one of the things you also have to appreciate is modern medicine, that, you know, we extend the life of a lot of kids who couldn't or wouldn't have walked out of a hospital in 1950,
true.
1960. And
That's
so
true.
our population of students who have needs comes to public schools, and we have to service them.
That's a
And-
very good point,
but-
actually. Yeah.
But you look at the system and saying how we could expand or do better. I want to impress upon you, you can't do any better than what Tiverton does. It is an ideal, it is a model, and go back to the per pupil special ed slide I gave you, and you'll see how we're on that lower end because we contain costs better than anybody.
You're massively trying to keep them in the normal classes, right?
Of course.
Okay, just a good reassurance. Thank you very much.
Mr. Edwards, could you recognize Mrs. Black?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I realize how hard your job is. I've been coming to these meetings since 2003. I've probably missed one. Budget committees looking at the police, the fire, DPW, everyone that needs to be funded. I didn't sit over in the school and say, we need this, we need that. No. What do we all need? One pie. We all have to share it. Maybe we should grow the pie and bring some development in here. I've been saying that for a long time, too. But I am a teacher of students with special needs. I started in 1967 when I graduated from Salve. I started in Head Start, one of the best programs in the country, Head Start. They had nurses and teachers, and they had the elderly working in there. It was amazing. But I said to them, what about these kids that are 4 years old that are going to have to go next year? And don't forget, then it was sit down and shut your mouth. They were all in the row. They had to go down under the lights, go in the classrooms. I said, they're not going to make it. Where do they go? And they said, Sally, in this city of Fall River, there's 29 classes for children with, according to IQ, special needs. But for those that they called them hyperkinetic then, they'd have different names now. There's nobody. They gave us a 3-year waiver to go back to school and get trained. Because in those days, it was one school with all these students in it. No expectations. They were treated like animals. It was horrible. Then they passed IDEA in the 70s, individual with disabilities. As Dr. Sanchioni said, the federal government's 40% we promised, just like the state always promises. Remember, it was 60-40, we were supposed to get, no, now we get nothing. So as far as I'm concerned, in the funding, we do have to get a hold of our senators and everybody else. It's littered with broken promises from their end. And who's come up with it? The amazing citizens of the town of Tiverton. That's who's come up with it to keep us going all these years. So I can tell you it went from all in the same school to then self-contained classrooms, they all in the same class, but in a regular school. Then we started with inclusion. And now I cannot believe how exciting it is. You come into the Tiverton School Department, and you're going to see a unified basketball team. You're going to see a kid in a wheelchair inbounding the ball. A guy was sitting next to me, started crying. His son's name was Bubba. He was huge. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, for 2 nights a week, we're a regular family. He gets his uniform on, he gets his bottle, he jumps on the bus. It's amazing. And you know, in our classroom, we had a sign, because we had our classroom, and it said disabilities, and the dis was really small, and the abilities was good, because the sky's the limit for these kids. And let me tell you, you're all a high fever, or a car accident away from having one of those students, and you won't be able to thank the public schools for what they do for them. So I'm coming here standing in front of you, someone who has tried to manage this budget with all those zeros you see, and points to this and point that, because the town said, we have no money, Sally. We can't do it. We have to all have, okay, good, we'll do this. The teachers, no raises. Council 94, then the administrators gave up their raises. You all know these stories. But we're not coming here and asking you for the sky. We wouldn't do that. We're just asking to make it. And we're still going to have to cut if you give us the 4%. You saw the list. And the cuts are not anything I can raise my hand for. I'll tell you that right now. So I understand we have to go through this, and we have to all look at everybody's budget and come to something reasonable. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally.
Joe?
Just something I wanted to mention. On Ranger School, with the siding issues, there's a company called Rhino Shield. You've heard of them? I think that would probably be a good solution for that school, even if you just did the north end or something, if budget restraints, I mean, where the mildew is. I was gonna recommend that for our library and our public works building, because they have products. So if you're familiar with the company, they do, they'll actually come out and give you a free estimate too. I saw a job they did up in Newport, up on Lower Fame about like 8 years ago. It seems like it's holding up pretty well. So a lot of preparation work has to be done, so it lasts, but that was all.
What do they say it's going to last?
It's a lifetime warranty, but it's prorated after like 20 years, so.
Thank you.
But it's not just roofing, it's.
No, I mean, it's rated like a roof.
Yeah, but I mean, they have products for roofing, walls, siding, like it, that, there's a million products.
Okay, well,
Suggestion.
Yeah.
I would like to thank Dr. Sanchioni and Dr. Larkin, school committee for coming and talking to us. I heard a rumor you want to come back on the 12th.
Yeah, I think that was the plan.
What's that going to be about?
What's it gonna be about? Money, I
I
think.
mean, no.
Change their minds.
Jerry, it's not all about money.
I didn't think it was going to be pizza
Jay.
and beer, but,
Gosh.
If I may.
Yeah.
Jay, I think at that point, we want to go
Money.
public with that cut list that you have in front of you right now and get you to understand, and get the community to understand the impact of that budget at 4% and what's left over. And I think that's important to do. And, one of the things you had said when we met in the high school library was, it's not us who decides, we just bring it to the voters. And if anything, we want to press upon you, at least let's give everyone a shot to look at this and evaluate it.
Have an informed decision.
okay.
And, maybe we'll find 1,000 or $1 million or $5 million somewhere.
I keep saying we need another casino.
Yes.
We need
We
another
need
what?
two. We need two casinos.
Another
One
Why,
isn't enough.
why, so we can misspend the second one too?
But can I mention on the casino,
Well,
let's
you're
say,
right.
Oh, no, we're going on a tangent.
no, if in 10 years that goes bust, that could be, that could happen.
Everybody else decides.
I'm going to try and close the school committee, but I'll leave you with one last thought. Education is expensive. Special education is really expensive. But to let the schools be degraded squanders a fortune. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the school committee. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Turn to our ghost town now.
Okay. And everybody runs away. Does everybody have a copy of the minutes from January 30th?
It's in our package.
I think we passed them out at the last meeting. That went way over time.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Put it off until this meeting.
That's good. No, that's a good school. I'm not saying that, but,
Draft letters on the.
yeah. Oh, it's really in Paris? Oh, so you can go to different locations in that school. What's she studying? That's good. Well, she
We got them last week, but we didn't do anything.
she has to be pretty
Yeah, we
careful
didn't
there,
do
though.
anything
Some
with it.
pretty
But
riots and things
don't tell
happen.
me
Does she
you
have
threw 'em
any incidents when she's been there
Yes.
so far? Okay.
Jennifer gets the prize. Looks like this.
Wait, I don't know.
No, they came to me.
Which one first? Which one from the
January 30th?
January 30th.
January 30th?
16th.
That's fine.
I have the 7th, 27th.
Oops.
Okay, who doesn't have a copy?
I don't, but I wasn't here.
I read 'em
But I read
online.
them online.
I
We
did
sent them
too.
out
You
to
wouldn't
everybody,
vote on 'em
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
We'll get them to you.
No,
Yeah,
that's
no.
okay. I got them. You emailed them to us.
Let's just
don't-
motion to
I read
pass them on
I
and get
looked
done
them
with it.
over.
All right. That one didn't work out.
We want, are we not gonna do it?
Uh,
Need a motion to approve? Or
yeah.
not?
If everybody's got one. Okay, let's do this another one. Sherry wasn't here, Alex, he was gone, Thomas was absent.
Right.
Who's that lead? Do you have your copy?
I read it online, I'm good with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's
I
do it
read
that
them
way.
too.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from January 30th to 20?
I will second it.
All those in
All
favor?
in favor?
If I was there.
Right,
that
and I abstained
Was I there?
because I was gone.
Ruth was,
Which one is this?
Ruth was there.
Okay, I voted yes. I didn't know which one.
February 6th,
Those I have.
that was at the town hall.
I can actually go to the bathroom because.
We had the
I'm
senior
not-
center, the tax collector, and all been there. The only person that was absent was Sherry.
Sherry. That's what I was gonna say. I have to run to the.
All those in favor of approval of the minutes?
I'm gonna be an abstain on all of 4 of them.
Okay, moving on, February 11th.
Motion to approve the minutes from 2/11. Special meeting.
That was a special meeting, we were at the library. High school library, that was with the school committee.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I already did, you can second.
I'll second it then.
Okay, all those in favor?
I was
The absentees were Sherry, Joe Souza, Tom Haley, and Brendan.
I was at the library.
Joe Souza was at the library.
No, that was at the, one we had the joint meeting.
Okay. Oh, no, I didn't go, okay.
Oh, that one, yes, okay.
February 16th, special meeting. We were at the police station and Public Works Garage.
I'll make a motion to
Sure, I
approve
went to that one.
minutes from February 16th, special meeting.
I'll second.
Those in favor?
And Tom.
The absent from
And
that
Tom
were
abstained.
Sherry, Jennifer Joslin, and Tom Haley. Tom Haley.
3 then, right? Okay.
Okay. Administrative items. Next Thursday, we have the fire department, recreation, and police and DPW to finalize their capital requests that we had to cut short. You all know that now Nancy is the interim town administrator.
I
Didn't know that.
didn't know that.
Yeah, she is. We don't know how long Jan's gonna be out. I have asked her that as soon as she gets the budget from the town council, and by the way, they're in marathon sessions right now. They've already done a bunch of cuts. I've asked them, they asked me if I wanted to bring them to you, and I told her no, not until it's done, because it'll get it'd just be turmoil.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I've asked her, the treasurer, everybody to give us their budgets as immediately, not sit on the administrator's desk until the 14th. We're supposed to have them by the 14th, but that's a drop dead date. We can have them sooner, and we're gonna need them sooner. Between March 5th and April 2nd, we have 4 regular meetings scheduled. We have 3 special meetings sort of scheduled. Based on past experience, and everybody here has past experience, what do you think? You're gonna be able to pull this off in that time?
Do you mean by special meetings, you mean like on a Wednesday?
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays?
Tuesdays, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering right, and I might not be, but I think last year we only used like, the last 2 weeks, we used those Tuesdays. As we wrapped it up, it wasn't the 3 weeks, it was the 2.
Well, yeah, and I thought the meeting after, not the 5th, but the one after that, we should probably just quickly define what, you know, how the budget is developed.
Because that last one, we go late, and I think we start to
Well, yeah,
slide
we
down the
have
slope
been
after
known to
10.
go late, but we don't necessarily have to if we budget our time properly.
Right, those
So
last,
in that meeting, not the 5th, but the following one, we should go over the resolutions quick, and then start the marathon, voting on the budget, starting with the things that we really can't control,
Right.
and working our way down.
those last couple meetings, 2 years ago, I think we started at 6 o'clock at the very end.
We could,
Is that something everyone's comfortable with at the end, those last couple?
yeah, you know, we'll, as we.
So we're not here
progress,
till
we'll get a better
11 o'clock?
feeling. I mean, do you want to decide that now, or do you want to wait until we actually?
we can wait and see how it goes. And if we need a bump, didn't we do that, right?
I think we did toward the end.
I think if we get all the arguing done early, then we can just ram it down.
Just save the ones that we're gonna
Stay home and we
argue.
can
Honestly,
avoid all that.
like, just put the ones we're gonna argue about to the side, and we'll do those last.
But that's up to you.
No, I don't know. I think we're gonna come up to an agreement this year. That, you know, I mean, we're gonna give them some, but we can't give it everything to everybody.
Joe's like,
I
all
think,
in, we're
I
gonna
think it
be
all
in
becomes
agreement.
relative too, when we start to fill in the Excel sheet, and we go, oh, wait a minute, let's come back, you know, you come back full circle, because you know, depending on what department you start with, you go, okay, yep, let's give it, you know, let's put this towards that. And then as we start to fill it in, we go, oh, wait a minute, we're over, and then you have to revisit. So, and that's where we really start to compromise.
I'm not Jeff Karen, so you're not gonna see anything up on this screen,
Yeah.
unless somebody else cares to do it.
I think Tom did it.
I think Tom did it, but I think that's helpful, because when you start to see the boxes get filled in, and then you see the percentages, that's when we know what we have to we know we're heading in the right way or the wrong way.
Excel spreadsheet, wasn't it? Is that what it was?
Because, quite frankly, I'm incapable of doing that.
Yeah, but Tom did it last year, and I think that visual was really helpful,
Yeah, it
because
is.
when you start to
I
put it in,
agree.
you're like, oh, wait a minute, we're gonna be over the cap, or,
And I will make one comment.
Kissing all them
I don't
girls
think
and
I've made
getting
it
sick.
before. It is not our job to be driven by the potential of an alternate budget from anybody. What we have to do is look at this thing and do the best job we can with the facts that we know, without regard to what somebody else might do.
That's always an option.
I vented my spleen on that.